OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, you're very welcome along. It's Monday morning and we have a very, 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 very busy programme for you. There was too much sport on over the weekend. We're going to try and sift through it for the little nuggets of gold. But wherever you're watching in the world, we'd love to hear from you this morning. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can also get us on YouTube, youtube.com/offtheball. Make sure you subscribe if you want to leave a comment. Or you can tweet us at OffTheBall AM. Colin is here.
Ger, good morning.
And Nathan is here.
All right, lads.
It was a very busy weekend.
It's too much on. There was too much. We say this most weekends. It really felt like it. This weekend, like no GAA on national TV on Saturday, felt like, oh my God, this is a great opportunity to do that because yesterday was so stacked. And with all that said, with all this sport played, there's only one thing on my mind, and I want to know: is Nathan Murphy getting a new hamster?
No, I'm not getting a new hamster. No.
This is revealed on Dadcast last week, folks.
Yeah, I'd never spoken about the hamster before, so I don't think the nation had a love for the hamster. But the hamster's no more. Buried.
No replacement?
Absolutely not.
There's a scene in The Simpsons where they operate on him and on one, do the CPR, and then the hamster dies and they throw it and it bounces into like a little basketball net into the bin, and it's like, that's...
Well, you got to question any pet that when you wake up on a Monday morning and you're looking at it and it's not moving in the cage, but you're still questioning whether it's dead or alive.
Yeah.
You've got to question any pet. Great line.
So... there was too much sport on over the weekend. It's difficult to navigate a way through it. I managed to miss all of the best parts, I think.
Good man.
I missed the penalty shootout. Was it good as penalty shootouts go? Was it a good penalty shootout?
That was top class, yeah.
Was it?
A lot of top corner, whipping them in low.
Yeah, we'll get to it in the performance rankings, but David De Gea and penalty shootouts, not a match.
I did see
no chemistry.
I did see a fair bit of Ulster on Friday night, which was...
of all the things all weekend that you picked to watch.
Well, yeah. So the bits of the Liverpool game that weren't good, I was like, what? I don't know.
A lot of it.
Yeah, but it seemed pretty exciting.
It was, because of the way Liverpool play right now, where no matter how many goals they score, you feel every time the opposition go forward, they're probably going to score. But that was an entertaining game.
All right.
So you watched Ulster ahead of Arsenal.
Well,
the games of the season.
We were. There was a bit of flicking going on, but not much. Yeah, I mean, that opening 35 seconds of the Arsenal game really set the table for everything. Because Ramsdale got to the point where it's like, oh, he's England's number one goalkeeper in waiting, right? Just as soon as Pickford has a mistake at international level, Ramsdale's going to be in. It was one of the best signings that anybody's made. They've transformed him into a world-class keeper. And maybe he still is. Maybe we shouldn't overreact to a chronic error at the moment where your entire career is coming down to, all we got to do is win this game. Just win this game. I'm going to kick it out to you. No?
That's the way Arsenal play. He made a mistake. He made a big mistake. He's had an exceptional season. But for 2 or 3 years, Arsenal have played out from the back in an incredibly risky way that when people were criticising Arteta 18 months ago, you thought, well, this just isn't sustainable. Generally, it works. But with everything that's gone on over the past couple of weeks with Arsenal, you just think, here, lads, first few minutes, let's keep this calm.
We're going to get into this.
Here's official.
Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock on the show. Our performance rankings are imminent. In 1 minute, Alison Miller is going to join us to talk to us about Ireland being nilled by England and it not actually being the complete 100 points that we thought it might be. What are your arms in the air for?
So stacked. It's a sporting weekend. It doesn't even make the performance rankings.
Andy Mitten at 8:20. Shane's at the Snooker, that's why he's not here. At 8:40, Anthony Moyles is going to join us in studio to talk to us about the humiliation of the Meath footballers. Noel Connors is going to talk to us about Waterford and their plan, which worked up to a point against Limerick yesterday, and then we'll play out some highlights from the Sunday pay-per-view. But at 7:34 this morning, it is time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Baby. You were giving me dagger looks there because I was talking about Ramsdale before we got to the performance rankings. That was it. Yeah. That's it. All right, Nathan, take it away.
We're starting in the red this week.
Yes.
All right, let's go. North London. Bloody hell, what a weekend. Started Friday night with Arsenal with that 3-3 draw. They remain top of the Premier League, but 3 games in a row where they've had 3 consecutive draws, and in a manner not befitting of potential champions. Now, it's not done just yet. They are still 5 points clear, albeit it's in City's hands. And now you feel they need to go and possibly win at the Etihad Stadium, but also you look at their fixture list after this. They still have Chelsea to go, Newcastle, Brighton. There's a lot of doubts over this Arsenal side. Bottle is the word that's been used again and again. I think it's one of these cases where, you know, two things can exist at the same time, where nobody even predicted Arsenal were going to finish top 4 this season, I think. So they've had a remarkable season, but there's been too much emotion at play for too long with this Arsenal side, and to be in total control, play outstanding against Liverpool for the first half an hour and let them back into it. All right, it's at Anfield. Liverpool are always going to have a spell. They're always going to give you something. But that game is totally under control. It's even worse against West Ham, where first 10 minutes, blitzed them. It's 2-0. It could have been a Newcastle Spurs in the first 20 minutes of that game. Let them back in, drop points again. And then just the general sloppiness of their defending, right from, as you say, the first 30 seconds, was one of the games of the season. I don't know how they didn't win it in injury time. I was convinced they were going to win it in injury time. They probably should have won it in injury time. Gabriel Jesus, it felt like he was more interested in getting a penalty than actually putting himself in position to take a chance. But, you know, again, it's that thing of the two things existing where you would question their bottle, but also how many times have they shown unbelievable character this season to come back to score late goals.
My timeline was full of very angry Arsenal fans giving out about Gavin Bazunu. I was like, I'm proud of
What's Gavin Bazunu done?
Well, time wasting. They were clocking it's 33 seconds since the ball went out of play. Was he not good?
I didn't think he had an exceptional game. There was not great decision making at times with when he was coming out of his area. He conceded 3 goals. Definitely the last goal, he palmed the ball straight back into the path of Saka. So I don't think it was an exceptional Bazunu display. It was fine. It was obviously nobody cared about Southampton at the end if they'd gone on and won that game. It's a massive step for survival. But yeah, Arsenal are they're having a dip at just the wrong time. And I remember the build up to the last Manchester City game. Like, we were midway through the season, but it felt like we were 3 games from the end with the approach of the Arsenal players, just how emotionally invested they were, and you felt like they need to calm things down. And the City game, the defeat there, calmed things down. But again, they're just playing at 100 miles an hour, like the little huddles in after every goal conceded of absolute panic stations. It's like, just go back to doing what you're doing. Now, a lot of players are having a dip in form, like Partey. Obviously, Xhaka didn't play last night, but you could, the way he sort of seemed to ignite the Anfield crowd. But Partey's definitely been struggling over the last few games. Defensively, they're starting to make a lot of individual errors. Saliba been absent. Who would have thought again at the start of the season William Saliba would be such a key player for Arsenal, but his absence and Rob Holding comes in seems to have unsettled things, and they are kind of totally reliant on Odegaard, Martinelli and Saka on just dragging them through. But they still have the points on the board.
Yeah, I mean, they were very close to making this an extraordinary comeback, like you said, Nathan. They hit the bars with a 3-3 right at the end. But I think what's happened to them since they went 2-0 up at Anfield is kind of the team is an encapsulation of Mikel Arteta. Like, he loses his cool so often on the sideline, and if you're a player looking over him, you're like this is our manager. This is the one person who's supposed to stay calm and composed amidst the pressure cooker of the top end of the Premier League. And at the same time, it's Arteta's passion and never say die attitude that helps his players get back into games where they should have a lost cause. So like 2-0 and 3-1 down on Friday night, a lot of teams would have faltered completely, and they came back, and you never doubted that they would.
They are against the worst team in the league.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
they're playing Southampton. You
at the same
they're
time,
going to get a lot of chances.
Yeah,
like there's probably the zenith of the season was 2-0 up at Liverpool, and since then it's fallen away bit by bit. And last week we put Arsenal in the amber when they drew 2-2 at West Ham after going 2-0 up, and this week they're in the red because it's basically 3 points from 3 games, essentially 2 defeats. And like you say, Nathan, it's in Manchester City's hands.
Yeah, the difficulty is, though, that when you're doing out the rest of the season, you're chalking this down as 3 points at West Ham and 3 points against Southampton. And you know that City are now in rolling ball of knives form, and they're going to win every game. And so Arsenal could lose this by 10 points now. That's on the cards. There's a possibility that if the other teams weren't so bloody useless,
Yeah. I'm definitely on the side of the fence that Arsenal have had a brilliant season, regardless of what happens to them here. I know they were miles ahead, but you can't doubt the muscle memory alone of Manchester City under Pep Guardiola and their ability to win leagues.
Sure, the difficulty is that this was their chance. Like they're not.
I don't think it is though.
Well,
I don't think it's like Tottenham.
Football moves quickly.
I don't know.
This is their chance.
We just don't know. This could well be their opportunity, and Manchester City come back next season and are better than ever. Like Arsenal could win the league this season on 89, 90 points. Like, you know, Manchester City, that would be a disastrous season for them to not get over 90 points. Like, I think after the Liverpool game, there was an overreaction in terms of, you know, throwing away 2 points. You can't do that at this stage of the season.
That was a good result.
Which is, again, the force of what Manchester City do, that you have to win every single game. But to draw 3 matches in a row when this opportunity has presented itself, now maybe they do go to the Etihad and win.
They're not going to the Etihad.
I don't think so. I'd be shocked.
That is not it's not going to happen.
I don't know. Like City, it's so rare they play games like this where actually it's all on the line in the league. It's a nighttime game. The atmosphere is going to be up. It's going to be absolutely electric at the Etihad Stadium. But that's not something actually City are that used to playing in. So maybe the emotion that Arsenal will bring into it, if they can get up again, because the other thing was, it looked like from the body language of the Arsenal players that they almost felt it was done on Friday night. Like they were absolutely devastated.
They are correct.
After the game. And here, Arsenal, again, look at the age profile of the attacking players in their side. Absolutely, there's an opportunity that they kick on from here.
Yeah.
But football moves so fast. Manchester City invest yet again. You would have to expect United are going to be better next year. Newcastle are going to invest massively. Liverpool will have to be better next year.
Yeah, but there's nothing to say that Arsenal won't be better next year either. I don't think this is like Tottenham in 2016-17 where they won't replenish the squad.
Well, what if the manager is good but not great? What if actually Arteta is only okay? What if that emotion that you're talking about is... What if he's in prison for that?
I think
there's no evidence yet to suggest that he is as good as Pep Guardiola.
No, I think he's building his own side, and I think they've made massive improvements from this time last season. Do you remember at the end of last season too, they batted it again away to Newcastle and in the North London Derby.
They did.
So they did it there. But the difference is that they've been so much more consistent this season than last, and he's continually building a side in his own mould. So I think I would put him down as very good so far. And I can see him as a Premier League winning manager. I don't see why this Arsenal squad will falter for seasons to come in title races if they keep the core of their side. And they're going to attract younger players now who may not be at the absolute elite of the game but are kind of B-class players.
Flaky at the end of last season, flaky at the end of this season.
Yeah, that's what they need to improve on.
That's their mould, is that what you're saying?
But their whole season this year is so much better than last campaign. So it's an improvement. Like.
Well, it is, and they obviously spent a lot of money and they bought relatively well. But if they buy badly this summer, which they have bought badly in the past, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to be at the level they're at compared to everybody else.
Well, last season they faltered in the Champions League race. This year's the title race. So if they can get rid of these stupid kind of errors where they're dropping points at the tail end of the season, that's where they actually have a tangible target for next season. It was like, remember the end of the season, lads.
But
we had 2 examples of this.
The difficulty is to repeat what they did at the start of the season, where they were on this
but he says we've done that
winning run.
And we've done that, so we can do it again.
With the exception of Manchester City, very few teams have been able to do that in back-to-back seasons.
Arteta has the Pep
and
template.
City are an all-time great
he's
team.
the Guardiola template.
But there's no template. Like Pep Guardiola is a genius,
and Arteta saw that up close and personal.
Yeah, but
for
that's
a couple of years.
Okay. I mean, you can copy genius, but it looks like a copy. It's like an old school fax machine where you get the thing through. Oh, this looks good.
All the greats borrow from greats. The Rolling Stones. Blues music.
Yeah,
borrowed. It's not complete.
So Arsenal are the Rolling Stones in this analogy, right? Okay.
I think so. Also, what's got missing in this throughout is Gabriel Martinelli scoring one of the goals of the month with that volley. The way he took that, just off the ground, and to keep it low and hard in the first goal for Arsenal against Southampton. Oftentimes, because there's so much sport happening at the moment that you can easily forget the individual great moments. But I thought that was one of the best goals I've seen in a long time. Very unusual strike. It's got lost in the 3-3 draw.
All right. Okay. Arsenal, we haven't even mentioned Spurs. We're going to have to fly through these a bit faster here.
Yeah, Spurs, I mean, like we were saying last Monday, I don't know why they settled for Christian Stellini for the rest of the season. Surely they can get someone else out there, a guy who's not a manager. And they saw it there 5-0 down inside 21 minutes away to Newcastle. It's the second earliest 5-0 capitulation in Premier League history. The other one was back in 2019 when Manchester City thumped Watford ahead of beating them in the cup final later on that season. But, I mean, it was an absolute joke. Like, it could have been double digits at the end. And they made a sub after 20 odd minutes with Pape Sarr coming off. The defensive starting lineup did not work out. Elise Cellini rectified that and kind of stemmed the tide, and it was 1-1 for the rest of the game. But I'm just so surprised that with the team who are on the cusp of Champions League qualification, who need that money of the Champions League, have settled for a guy who's never managed a team. It's very unusual. Surely there's someone out there, surely there's a troubleshooter out there who can do a job for Spurs to the end of the season, or make the long-term appointment now. But why do they not just cut their ties completely with the Antonio Conte reign? Use that time wisely and get a whole new set of managers and coaches in.
Yeah, look, I guess, I don't know. It didn't make any sense. You do have to give Newcastle some credit for how brilliant they were. And, you know, I'm just thinking back to this time last week when Aston Villa absolutely annihilated this Newcastle team. So anyway, just need to shoehorn that reference in. And are we moving on?
I was going to say, ironically, Stellini said they weren't prepared to suffer, which... I think
he's suffering
very much.
Big time. Newcastle might make the top four, Ger.
Well, Newcastle are raging hot favourites to make the top four right now. Like, obviously, Liverpool won at the weekend, but Newcastle have 7 games left. They need to lose at least 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Liverpool win all their games. With what we saw from Liverpool at the weekend is just not going to happen. They're conceding way too many goals. And how do Spurs bounce back from this? Underrated story of the season is how many goals Harry Kane has scored. Like 24 Premier League goals in an absolutely bang average Spurs side where everyone around him is underperforming. Heung-min Son nowhere near the player last season. Kulusevski's form has fallen off a cliff. They've no midfield at all. The wings backs barely contribute, and still he manages to score even yesterday in every single game.
Well, they're a bit like Manchester United. They've kept a whole lot of players for a long time who were good but not great, like Eric Dyer, Hugo Lloris. Even Son is probably not the player he was, and they're just keeping them because they're not terrible players by any means. They kind of throw in 6 or 7 out of 10 performances regularly enough, but they've lost that spark that they had a few years ago. Again, like you used the word replenish, they need to replenish that squad completely.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens and who is actually into taking that gig. It has the bang of a Brendan Rodgers job for me now, and you've got to sell Harry Kane to get the money in to reinvest in the team. That seems to be the only way that they're going to reinvest properly at the level that they need to do. So a sobering morning for all the Spurs fans. Like
North London,
just so abject. Right, that's one of the Reds done. What's next?
Next in the red, Meath. Wow. Meath are heading to the Tailteann Cup. They will not be part of the All-Ireland series. Beaten by Offaly yesterday. Colin O'Rourke in his first season already under enormous pressure. Looking rather glum on the back of most of this morning's papers. We're going to have Anthony Moyles in and we can do a proper deep dive in this, but from talking to a few people yesterday, this didn't come as a massive shock. They needed a fluky goal to draw with Offaly last year. They've generally struggled against a lot of these mid-ranking teams, and right from the start I think there were question marks about what Colin O'Rourke was trying to do tactically with this side.
Two early successes in the league, which if they hadn't happened, they'd be Division 3 team next season, and like it'd be as low as they've been ever.
Yeah, like they showed little or nothing in the league, as you say. It was the ineptitude of other sides that kept them in the league.
They were being heralded for the goal scoring and lumping the ball into the full forward line for the first 2 weeks, and then after that everybody was like, oh, that's what you're going to do, Grant. What else have you got? Oh, nothing. Yeah.
Well, there seems to be some confusion as to what the game plan would be, and that they have brought in some of the backroom staff from the Meath ladies footballers, but the style of play that the men are playing is looks nothing like what helped the Meath ladies to such success. And yeah, in some ways, like we've looked at Meath and make an excuse, have they been just beaten down so much by the Dub success that there's not young players coming through? But even still,
LMFM said one of the worst results in living memory for the Royals. Like that's a nadir. The lowest of the low. That's not to pour Offaly in all this. Obviously, they deserve a lot of praise. And in a normal week, they would have been in the green. It's just that they were too busy this morning to shoehorn them into the green. But Meath is the story here, where if you remember back, like the whole point of what the O'Rourke era was supposed to be about was beat Dublin. Now they're not in the same competition as them.
Yeah, it was going to revitalise the entire county, and nobody was expecting in year one they're going to go and beat Dublin, but that this was the start, that by year 3 they would be there back contending in Leinster finals and being a real team in a Leinster final. But like Meath have been I wouldn't say a downward spiral to this extent for a long, long time. They had that season in Division 1, but they didn't look of that sort of quality at all. And as you say, they could well be in Division 3. And again, even looking at the team yesterday, it felt like they finished the game with maybe a stronger team. They started. O'Rourke's on about giving 4 debutants. Like, did they rip it up a little bit too much when he came in? Did it need the sort of dramatic surgery that he's given this Meath side so quickly? And now you look at it and wonder where O'Rourke goes from here. Like, they head towards the Tailteann Cup. It feels if O'Rourke is to get years 2 and 3, like, they need to perform in the Tailteann Cup. They can't just throw their hat at it now for the season. Like, they need to be getting to a Tailteann Cup final or winning a Tailteann Cup.
If Down beat Armagh in the Ulster semi-final, Down won't be in the Tailteann Cup. But if Armagh beat Down, which you probably would expect at this stage, but that's going to be a very tight game. Like, if Conor Laverty can keep all of his players around for the Tailteann Cup, then you'd make them overwhelming favourites for it.
Yeah, there was such immense positivity around the appointment, wasn't there? And when he was on, even Tommy Tiernan talking about what he wants to do with this Meath setup. But you look at even listening to him afterwards, like, we'll have a bit of audio there that we'll play in a while after the match. But like, he didn't hide away from it. Like, everything went wrong. We weren't good enough in the day. You got 70 plus minutes to score more than the opposition, and we couldn't do that. It's tough, but it's an opportunity as well. We're in the Tailteann Cup. We're going to make the most of it. I mean, is there any sort of excitement at all around Meath about the Tailteann Cup?
If they were to win it, like, it's green shoots, and it's football into the summer, and the panel will be fully formed next year, and they won't be behind everybody else when that comes around. But like, we didn't see Westmeath parlay success last year into promotion in the league, which is the single most important thing that could have happened. If you look at Monaghan need to be the example for all of these smaller counties, or counties who are below where they think they should be. Their club system is run brilliantly, and they have a throughput of players constantly. And also, obviously it helps when you've McManus playing the way that he's playing every year for the last 17 years. But at the same time, like, Meath have no excuses here. Like, this is as grim a vista as they possibly can have. And so, I don't know. We'll see how excited the county are. Like, we'll see how many people come out for those games.
It's always hard for a county with the history of Meath to try and reset for a Tailteann Cup. Like, you talk about Down, if Down were to end up there, it would be seen as a big stepping stone for them if they were to go to the Tailteann Cup and go and win it. Like, Meath will look at the Tailteann Cup and think, we're above this. Now, they're not. Clearly, they are not. But do the players take it seriously? Do they feel that they belong in the Tailteann Cup? Do they feel that they're in a position where we need to start from the bottom again and sort of build ourselves up and prove that we're the best of the rest? Because they're a million miles off Sam Maguire level. Never mind that absolute elite of the top 6 or 7 teams. Like, they would get whipped by any of those teams right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what O'Rourke can do to keep all the players there for the Tailteann Cup, and because they should, they should be getting into the latter stages of the Tailteann Cup.
We are potentially a couple of weeks away from a couple of other teams dropping down into the Tailteann Cup as a result of their...
The Kildare Meath Tailteann Cup clash is the one we're all looking forward to,
their league performances. So we shall see. There's not that many permutations, really. The Louth Offaly game is suddenly a game of significant interest for Kildare football fans, as is the Ulster football semi-final.
If Offaly or Down win, Kildare are into the Tailteann Cup. Yeah,
fair play to Offaly too, like, first back-to-back win in Leinster since 2006.
Well, the fact that this was Meath's first game of the championship and Offaly already had that game, I'm sure gave them a something of an advantage. And as you say, maybe it's too historical to be looking at it going, well, Meath will always beat Offaly in Leinster.
Their ambition surpasses the reality for Meath, maybe more than any other county at the moment. But I get more than that than Anthony Moyles, I'd say. It'll be interesting to hear from him.
Yeah, if you're a Meath fan, we'd love to hear from you. If you're an Offaly fan, we'd love to hear from you. It's an incredible result, and obviously they talked in the aftermath about the passing of Liam Kearns and how his name has been mentioned in the build-up to the games by the team as well. Like, an incredibly emotional victory for them, and it would be remiss of us not to mention that in passing this morning too. So that's Meath in the red. What else?
The amber We're going for the Irish teams in the URC. A bit of a mixed bag over the weekend. The final round of the regular season. Munster probably the standout result. 22 all draw against the Sharks. Very unlucky not to win it. Gavin Coombs was held up on the line after 80 minutes, and it was kind of hard to see on the video evidence whether he did manage to touch the ball down, but it didn't matter in the end because Munster would have finished up in the same place. It was a real struggle in the first half for Munster. The Sharks absolutely killed them in the scrum, but showed a lot of grit, a lot of determination, got the draw, secured themselves Champions Cup rugby for next season in the knockout stages, and an opportunity maybe over the next month to finally start to build a little bit of something. As like everybody else, I was doing a lot of flicking through channels on Saturday. When I flicked on TG Carter to the Leinster game, I was quite confused as to what I saw, and I think it might have been 55-0 when I switched on. Remember, Leinster were unbeaten all season in the URC. Now this was, I don't know if you would call it a second string team. It was the kids.
Yeah. They probably needed an annihilation of some sort, didn't they?
Why?
Because if they're just going to constantly win over and over again, they need some sort of example. Or Leo Cullen does, to say look, this is what happens when we're not quite on it. Because at the moment he's like, Jesus, everything's going so extremely well, no matter who I put out there.
Yeah, but for Leo Cullen to have that conversation, he'd need 100 people in the room because the first 60 of them weren't involved.
Yeah, but you can say, well, look, lads, this is the standard you need to get to if you're going to be in the A group. So it's something for him. I mean, I would look at it as some sort of positive, but the result is so ugly that probably at the moment all they're thinking is, Jesus, what happened there?
Yeah, the result is pretty ugly.
I mean?
The result is pretty ugly. They obviously have bigger fish to fry. Next week it's Toulouse, and I don't know, Toulouse are amazing. So there is a potential. Stuart Barnes writing in the paper yesterday, this is the potential to be the best game of the year. One of the all-time great European games. Like, it really does. So
remember, Leinster didn't even send their coaching team over to South Africa for this.
Well, they
sent Sean O'Brien
over. They came home early. Yeah,
to prepare for that game. So
Connacht's beaten, but still alive, and we'll be playing Champions Cup next season
if neither Glasgow or Benetton win the Challenge Cup. You were mentioning beforehand, like Toulon look by far and away the best team in that. So unless there's a shock, Connacht will be back in the Champions Cup. Tight game, 29-27. So it's Connacht against Ulster in the quarterfinals.
You make Ulster slight favourites for that, but they had some injury concerns in the game on Friday night. They weren't particularly exciting to watch. There's just a feeling like Ulster are on the verge or something, but are still kind of struggling a little bit for what their full identity is. I don't know.
To a conversation from 5 years ago.
Well, that's the thing. That is the thing. Like, I see somebody talking over the weekend about maybe Joey Carberry could end up there. I don't know. Like, Ben Healy comes off the bench and plays really well for Munster, and everybody's like, oh, wouldn't it be better if he was still Irish? Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be better?
Jacob Stockdale's back.
He is.
What do you think?
He is back. A mixed bag with the high ball. Few knock-ons in the air that if you're going to displace Mac Hansen or get into the match day 23, you can't be making those mistakes. But I think that the commentator said that was his first try at Ravenhill in 2 years.
Wow.
But he looks like he's enjoying his rugby again. He's still only 27. Incredibly experienced, already in the top 5 or 6 of our top try scorers of all time. So
at 22 he was the golden boy of Irish rugby, so to come back you have to give him credit, Arsenal style. I wonder will he ever return to the peaks of what he had in 2018.
So it's Leinster against Sharks, Munster go to Glasgow, and it's Ulster against Connacht. Leinster by far and away the best team obviously in the competition, but it'll just be interesting that they play Toulouse next week, then they take on Sharks the week after, then there's more Champions Cup, then you're back into the knockout stages, so they're the ones with the fixture list. So then I guess we'll see
5 exciting weeks in a row if they can just get over Toulouse next week. Right, what's next?
We're into the green. We are going Limerick and Tipperary, who were the 2 winners on the opening weekend of the Munster Hurling Championship. Plenty to chat about, I think it's fair to say, with both of these performances. John Kiley, not happy at all with what we've all been saying over the last few weeks. When I saw the quotes, I was wondering what he was talking about. Some amount of bullshit. Yeah. Some amount of bullshit been spoken over the past week. I was wondering, was it Limerick are too good, they're ruining hurling. I think it was basically that everyone was saying that Limerick are going to cruise through Munster. They're just so far ahead of everybody else. It's like when's the coronation? It's just a matter of time before they win that 4 in a row. It's nonsense. Disrespectful to everybody that they're playing. And in a way I can see where he's coming from, because you look at their recent championship games, they've all been 1-score games. So they win by 2 points yesterday. They win by 2 points in the All-Ireland final. It was a 3-point game against Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final. Extra time in last year's Munster final. A draw with Clare before that. So these are not games where they're winning by 15, 16 points where it's done with 25 minutes to go. They give teams an opportunity, and maybe that's the one thing where they can slip up when there are questions and a lot of talk this morning about their discipline. And the red card for Gearóid Hegarty yesterday, and maybe Seamus Flanagan was very fortunate to stay on the pitch, a really high hit from him as well, that maybe a sending off at the wrong time in the wrong game will somehow see them get caught. But yesterday, much like the All-Ireland final, even though Waterford were right there and they had a load of wides in the second half, and there was the one where Ozzie Gleeson kicked it over the bar and it was brought back for the free, and Stephen Bennett misses
that free was unbelievable.
Desi Hutchinson misses a couple. You still never felt Waterford were going to win the game. Much like Kilkenny in the All-Ireland final last year, even though they were right there, they just about hold you at arm's length.
They should have won that. They should have won that game. I know they were getting hammered at the start, but to play with an extra man for over 22 minutes, they should have won that. They're not that far behind. But actually, but it does go back to the Limerick conversation, George. Remember a couple of weeks ago, Shane was saying he's getting bored of the Limerick dominance. But it's not like they're annihilating teams like Leinster Rugby. As Nathan just outlined, there are loads of examples. They're giving everyone a chance, and it's not just a discipline issue. It's their gung-ho attitude towards scoring leaves gaps. Even though they're very good at avoiding conceding goals, but they'll give you points. They'll give you points.
6 wides yesterday. They didn't rack up a massive score.
Quick counterpoint. What if this is like the incident at Anfield where everything is going your way and suddenly you put in a brutal tackle and the whole crowd is in fuego? What if now Limerick are in fuego after this? That's my prediction here, is that Waterford have roused the beast, and that because Gearóid Hegarty got a second yellow, so does that mean there's no ban for that? Is he available next week? I don't know.
Saturday night they play Clare, the Gaelic grounds.
I don't know if Declan Hanlon will be back either. The extent of that is tied to Burke as well for Waterford. But
Waterford did what people expected. They were very, very defensive. They got 14 men back. They crowded the centre. Keane Lynch had a very quiet game.
Yeah, he didn't score.
The one thing with Limerick that we've seen over the last few years is that if Keane Lynch has a quiet game today, he ain't going to have a quiet game next Saturday night.
No, and also the weather is still crap. I do feel like they're top of the ground, ball travelling very far. The puck outs go an extra 10 yards. They bring their bigger men in. At some point, Kyle Hayes might go back up to the forwards. Limerick are just getting going here. Everybody, calm down.
Yeah. You were saying is that Waterford waking the beast. Is it not just that we're underrating Waterford a bit, that they're actually probably one of the biggest contenders to Limerick?
Well, let's wait and see. How this, because we can easily overreact to the first week of championship fixtures. It'd be easy, I think, if you're Tipperary, not to overreact, not to be excited. They should be excited. I feel like somebody was saying they were coming in under the radar. Not really, though. Didn't feel that way.
Tip of the scoring power. The problem for Waterford is, for them to contain Limerick, they have to be so defensive. And James Skehill was on the Hurling pod last night making the point, 19 points is never going to beat Limerick. It was always what Andy Moore used to say about Mayo when they played the Dubs. You had to score 20 points. You knew you had to get to 20 somehow to have any chance. And actually, when you look at and again, if you're going out against Limerick 19 points, you're thinking you're going to have to get 25, 26 minimum. Whereas Tip, you feel, have that 5-22 yesterday. All right, they were given a couple of soft goals very early on, but 5 goals in a Munster Championship game, having scored a heap of goals in the league as well, except obviously in the game against Limerick in the semi-final. But 5-22, Jason Ford didn't score from play.
I'm interested. Think OTB need to do a segment on how poor punditry has gone, says Joe Show. It's poor across many sports, but the Sunday game is now not worth watching. Dowling refuses to comment on any Limerick discipline issues, and somebody else pointing out that they did loads on discipline from another team last year. It does strike me that getting the former teammate to do the bit on the discipline stuff doesn't make that much sense. Is there nobody else you're going to take that bit and I'll
Yeah, well, Ursula Jacob was there sitting beside Shane Dowling. I think what Shane Dowling was saying is these are incidents that happen in a 100 miles an hour game of hurling, and particularly the Seamus Flanagan one, when you slow it right down, it looks bad. It's a big hit on the Waterford player. He's a little bit high, throws the shoulder in a little bit too much. The point Dowling was making, which I would actually agree with him, is that's on the pitch. These things happen. Referee take care of it. An official wandering down to have a little puck at Gearóid Hegarty is totally unacceptable. And then a smile on his face as he's jogging off, having been sent off.
I do agree with that bit, right? But that doesn't mean that the bits on the field are acceptable either. And so what happens is that these two become part of the same conversation. This thing over here is far worse than what my teammates have done over here. I just ignore this bit here. I'm going to go over here and talk nothing about everything but this. It's classic deflection. What about?
Well, look, what you need is Tommy Walsh, who was live at the game for us yesterday, where there's no freeze. No freeze at all. Nothing to see.
Fair enough.
Like that's the look. The Kilkenny lads respect these Limerick lads because they know
they would have met fire with fire.
Very difficult for Shane Dowling's younger, I think, still than quite a few of the lads on that Limerick squad. But yeah, he was put in a is he going to come and hammer?
So that's not his fault, right? That's what I'm saying.
Is he going to come and hammer the two lads? Probably not. Like maybe it's Ursula Jacob who needs to take that one on.
Give us your views. Leave a comment in the YouTube. We've got one last green.
We do. Manchester.
You didn't want this at all, Nathan. You can distance yourself from this.
I thought we were going for Galway at one stage, but no, we're going for Manchester, both City and United. Obviously, the weekend started well for Manchester City with the Arsenal result, which means it's very much in their own hands now for the title ahead of that game on Wednesday. Then they win the most forgettable FA Cup semi-final of all time. I was against this because I just thought it was such a nothing weekend of FA Cup semi-finals. Why that game was played at Wembley against Sheffield United, where again, such is the fixture list, like Sheffield United, albeit pretty much secured promotion, but like they're playing twice a week all the time. The stadium is half empty. There was no energy to the game at all. Sheffield United offered little or nothing. Riyad Mahrez is brilliant, probably the most underappreciated footballer in English football over the last 10 years. Scores a hat-trick. So City
was player of the year 1 year.
He was, yes, when Leicester won the league, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I still think there's if you're picking, people are always a bit, easy Aussie, easy Aussie.
Yeah.
Top class, Riyad Mahrez. And then yesterday's game was dull and dour for most of it until everyone started to get a little bit tired, and it opened right up between United and Brighton. Brighton, they had their chances. Particularly the one.
Evan Ferguson, apparently, we saw footage of him arriving, and Bobby Zamora was on telly saying, during the week he knew he wasn't going to play, but then actually I think they left it to the right the last second and he went out in the field and just couldn't go.
Yeah, it's a real shame.
Shame because Dennis Dundav was so central to Brighton. The third choice striker, he had that chance. If his first touch was better, that would have been game, set and match, and Brighton would have gone through and they definitely would have been in the green. But I think it was a good cup tie yesterday, far better than the first one. I thought it was a game full of errors and nobody played that well, but there was chances galore. It could have gone either way, and it was probably perfectly encapsulated by the penalty shootout.
To the point that we were having the conversation last week about Rio Ferdinand, it's a better season for Man United having won the Carabao Cup. If Man United were to upset Man City in the cup final, almost nothing else would matter for the rest of the year. If they were just able to do that for the Man United fans, I'm having that. I'm having that. All of a sudden, that's a better season than Arsenal suddenly
flaking. Where are you on that?
The way they are.
I was having this debate with Arthur in here on Thursday night, and he was very passionate that if Arsenal don't win the league, it's sort of a forgettable season, the Manchester United season. Yeah. I think what Arsenal have had over the last year far surpasses.
It has to end well for Arsenal. If it blows up now, if they get hammered during the week and then basically don't win that many more points for the rest of the season, there's still a scenario where it's
been there. They're still there on Wednesday night playing in one of the biggest Premier League games in recent times where it's all on the line.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was certainly, I'm not having any, it's a better season for Man United winning the Carabao Cup, because if they win the Carabao Cup and don't do anything else, this was before they got absolutely trounced by Sevilla and then scraping through against Brighton yesterday. If the other potential here is that they get hammered by Man City, who are cascading to glory, securing the second leg of the treble. Will it be the second at that stage? Is the cup final after? It is, yeah.
Cup final is 3rd of June. Yeah, but
it's just before the Champions League final.
Yeah, no. It's simple answer. It's been a very successful season for both Arsenal and Manchester United. United see compared to this time last year under Ralph Rangnick, it was a complete disaster. So it's way better this season. Already won cup, into another cup final, first Manchester Derby Cup final. They're probably going to get top 4 in the Premier League. It's been an undoubted successful season. It's been pocketed by tragic results of 7-0 and 3-0 away to Sevilla and Anfield, the first 2 games of the season. That's why it's happened. And the reason that City are in these green performance rankings is simply because they're on for the treble, the first one of the century. That's it.
And if they were just to do a treble, it would be so sickening for Man United fans.
It's inevitable. They should have done the treble already. They're underachieving, if anything.
We've gone way over. It's 9 minutes past 8. That is this week's episode of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Right, Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee is coming to an Apple Green near you. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. After the break, we're talking about Ireland being annihilated by England in the rugby with Alison Miller. First, Colin O'Rourke's reaction to Meath's loss.
Right, Colin, I suppose what went wrong?
Well, everything went wrong. We weren't good enough on the day, and as simple as that. I don't make excuses. You get 70 plus minutes, 76, 77 minutes to score more than the opposition. We didn't do so. So we're not going to complain about anything.
2 points in the first half is nowhere near good enough. What was it? What are the answers? Like was it a game you just couldn't get up for?
No, that's not true either. The lads prepared very well for it. We were very happy with the preparation. Obviously, I suppose a championship match like Offaly had against Longford was a big benefit. We were coming in cold, but in saying that, we thought we had prepared well. Our first half shooting was very poor, and I suppose it's been a problem we've had all year that we haven't been able to run up enough points, and it came back to haunt us today.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
He's got O'Shea in behind, and is this the clinch? Oh, you bet it is! It's a goal for Arsenal, and Merson has scored it.
It's the Arsenal legend Paul Merson and UEFA Champions League winners John O'Shea and Wes Brown, and they are coming to Dublin.
Gets across it, Brown!
Myself and Joe are going to be hosting a very special UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat. It's on May 3rd in the Mansion House in Dublin. It is going to be a cracking night. It's an exclusive off-air event. So if you want to be there, get on to offtheball.com/events. Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, Alison Miller is with us to talk to us about Ireland's defeat at home against England in the Six Nations. Alison, it seems weird to say it, but maybe it wasn't as bad as it could have been?
No, let's put this into context. The whole tournament, they're the first team to keep England under 50 points. So I know they didn't score, so that's a big area they'll have to look at because they haven't scored. If you look at their attack, I suppose, unfortunately, they have scored one try against Wales, a penalty against France, a penalty try against Italy, and no score against England. So their defence really improved over the weekend. As I said, the first team so far in the championship that haven't let England score over 50 points, which they've done to the other teams. But not to score is, I suppose, the girls will be disappointed, and loads of areas to work on going forward now.
It's kind of, I guess we are clutching at straws at this point. The wreckage of this season is going to be very difficult to understand long term. Are there any green shoots that you're seeing that the side is improving, notwithstanding the fact that they did keep them under 50 points? One aspect or one argument to that might be just that England took their foot off the gas in the second half. Yeah,
I will be honest, I don't think I'd say England will be disappointed with their performance. They had a lot of errors, and they had so much possession. They weren't clinical when they had opportunities to score. But that's down to Ireland too. Ireland forced them into a lot of knock-ons, and Ireland's defensive sets were very good, turned over ball, forced them into errors. England were ill-disciplined around the ruck time sometimes, but Ireland, were responsible for some of that. But at the same time, and this is no disrespect to the players, England are coming there knowing, I suppose, that they're going to win the game, and then maybe it's hard to get up for a game like that. But at the same time, England have such a competitive 23 and beyond that they're essentially playing for places for next weekend. So there'll be girls there that played for England at the weekend that might not start now or might not get on the 23 because of their performance at the weekend. So, at the same time, there is consequences for those girls not performing against Ireland. But yeah, there is green shoots. Ireland's defensive structure looks a lot better. Their spacing looks a lot better. Like their missed tackles is still quite high, but a team against England, that's going to be the case for every team in the tournament, with the exception of France, if we're being honest. So, yeah, good improvements around that area. I thought the ruck height had come down a lot from last week, so that was better. Green shoots in terms of, like, I think, like, Derv Nicovardis had a really good tournament. Watching her there on Saturday, she's full of energy. She's quite small. She's playing 8. She's quite small. She's got really good footwork. She always beats the first defender generally, and she's so smart. Like, there was a time on Saturday where she had stepped a few defenders, carried, and she was on the ground, releases the ball, gets back up on her feet and carries again. So she's been really good, full of energy. She's absolutely everywhere. I think Nicola Friday's had a very consistent tournament. Sam Monaghan there, she's defensively so good around the park. Like, she'll probably herself look at her line out throwing and think she'll have to improve on that. But around the park, she's been very good. And Niamh Jones again, I'm mixing the two. Not that I'm mixing the two enough. Niamh Jones is Snooker, as I obviously know. Niamh Jones will have to improve her throwing in the line out, and she's been really good around the park. And then you're looking at Sam Monaghan there, who, carries hard, offload, defensively very good. So, like, the four of them there, I think, have had consistent tournaments, and it's difficult for this group of players. And I think, it's hard when you're a young player, and, like, if you're on social media and you're reading the stuff that comes, a lot of it uneducated, really, some of it, and it, not about the performance but other things. So look, you'd hope, like, that this is a really difficult time for these players, but hopefully it will have a galvanising effect on these players, and that they'll come together now and work really, 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 really hard to try and catch up and improve all those things that they need to improve. And, like, all they can do is work hard and try and get better and keep their heads down, and, not try and, like, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Social media and all these things now, like, you didn't have that years ago. Like, I started playing in 2010, and I was lucky that we were competitive enough even from that stage on. But, like, before then, like Fiona, Coughlin, Lynn Cantwell, they would have been shipping big defeats, but you didn't have the media pressure then. So it's about just keeping your head down and working really hard, because that's what they'll have to do. And I suppose they'll have to look at their improvements, but attack is really where you want to see the improvements with this team, because they haven't scored tries, and, like, they scored barely any tries, but we don't see, like, the front door, back door options. We're just kind of seeing quite a basic attack. So that's an area that they look to improve.
As obviously a lot in that there, Alison. It was interesting listening to Niamh Briggs ahead of the game on the criticism and the understanding the coaching team have that 20, 21-year-olds are going to be on social media. You can tell them stay away from it, ignore it, but human nature is they're going to be on Twitter, they're going to be on Instagram. All of this is going to be feeding in, and that they are trying to work in the background to keep that belief there and for them to ignore the noise that's around it. But it's very, very difficult. Like, in most sports, we would say setting up defensively is the easy part, and it was damage limitation. It was always going to be damage limitation on Saturday, so they knew what England were going to bring. Ireland, when they actually have the ball, what was your assessment of when they had opportunities to get at England, what they did at the weekend?
We didn't have very many opportunities, but at times we probably didn't look like we forced. There was one chance in the second half, I think, and we stretched them wide and gone back over to the right hand side and building good phases, and Lauren Delaney kind of put a ball through along the ground with a kick, and just the kind of the wrong option at the time. You want to keep building phases, and then England turned the ball over again. So I suppose, being honest, it didn't look hugely threatening when they had the ball, but you still got ability to score if you grind it out and you hold on to the ball. You can score, but I think just that they took the wrong options at, like, different times. Maybe kicked the ball away or just got turned over then. So we weren't actually able to see much attack because we didn't really have the ball. But that was an example of very good attack that ended up then being England turned it over then because the chip through didn't work. So and I just think, in regards to the thing about social media, that 20, 21-year-olds they will be on social media. Well, maybe that's a learning for them. If you talk to some of the men's players, some of them won't go on social media for that 5 or 6 weeks, you know. And if that's something that helps those players, and it is difficult, like I didn't grow up with social media, I'm not into it at all myself even now, but like if that's the hard hit you have to take for the 6 weeks, so you're not reading very negative material. And look, a lot of times from let's be honest, people that have no face to their name or no name to their whatever bio, maybe that's a learning, and maybe it's a thing that they need to do, like, and maybe they need to take the hit on that for 5 or 6 weeks. And if that helps, it could help. You know, maybe that's something that they'll decide next year. You know what? Can I do without it for 6 weeks? Maybe I can, and I go back on it. Because they are professionals now, and you will hear some of the professional men's players, they will do that. Because, and I was talking to an experienced player recently who's retired, and he said, look, he just tended not to read it, because when you're being told how great you are, generally that's not the case. Like, you're being told you're absolutely fantastic, and then when you're told you're absolutely terrible, but usually it's in the middle. Now, I know for these girls at the moment, they are not winning, and people are saying like horrible stuff as well. Maybe that's just a choice that they have to take the hard hit, get off. I'm not on social media, so I don't really know, but you know, like maybe that's been part of a professional approach that they'll take, and they might be able to. Yeah. And maybe some of the players maybe can be on it and be very good at not letting it affect them. And they'll know it as individuals, whether they'll learn from this year because they're young. They'll learn from going, well, did all that negativity around social media, did that affect me? Did that get into my head? No. Okay, I can stay on it. Yes, maybe I'll get off it for 6 weeks, but that's part of learning to be a professional player.
One last point, Alison. Yeah. The World 15, the 3 tiers competition that is going to be introduced. There's a lot of talk that we're going to be in the 3rd tier of that, and so therefore we'll be playing against some of the weakest teams around the world. In a way, right? Is it our own hubris? Are we Meath bragging about not being in the Tailteann Cup and then ended up in the Tailteann Cup and being too proud to go into it? Might it actually be better for this team to win some games against opposition, knowing that every year you'll have the Six Nations and you can measure yourself against better teams? Because that's where we are in the world. That's where a decade-long process of underinvestment in the women's game has left us a 3rd tier nation, and we need to stop thinking and pretending that we're a tier 1 until we start spending like a tier 1.
I don't think it's all about money though either. Like, so yeah, look, don't get me wrong, if you had an extra 10 grand there, you might entice more players to be full-time. That's being honest, but money doesn't, you know, cover over the cracks. It's not going to improve players straight away. It'll help, like any team that has more money. It does help. It doesn't make you world-class overnight. But that's a hard question to answer, because I think, I would never be a person that thinks you always have to aspire to be better. You've got to be realistic, but I don't think, like, I'm not even sure who's in tier 3, like who are those teams, and if you're
Kazakhstan, Jamaica.
Yeah. Who are they else? Anyone else? Kazakhstan, Jamaica?
Spain are going to be tier 2. Unless we win at the weekend, we're going to go into a playoff against Spain. Spain are going to be tier 2, so we're behind those nations.
Like, does it raise questions about the future of the Six Nations? I saw the England coach talking about this last week as to how viable it was for England and France to keep racking up these sort of scores, that if Ireland are a tier 3 team, and this is hard, I'm sure, for you to even consider where you were a decade ago to be having this conversation, like, is the future of the Six Nations under threat when you do have such a gap in quality between the teams?
Hard question to answer again, and I think Ireland needs to be tier 2, end of. They need to be there. They need to be, you know, keeping an eye on tier 1, but not being going down to tier 3. And that's being really honest. And like people saying, like England and France England have drove standards and have done everything to progress this game to where it is. So, like, it's up to the other teams to catch up and the other unions to do everything in their power to make Ireland, England, or Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Italy competitive. And you can't fault England or France for being progressive and doing more. All they can go out and play. And, you know, they have to play the best they can play and be ruthless, because if they don't do that, that's not good for the game as a whole. It's not good for the future of the game, where I'll be in 10 years. So different questions there, but France, England, like, it's not so long ago where these teams weren't hammering all the other teams. So, like, you can't. Like, what I'm trying to say is, like, we just need those other teams to catch up, and whatever they need to do that, those unions and those countries got to do it.
Okay.
And they can't be making excuses, just got to do it. And, there is 8 jobs now advertised in the RFU for like athletic development, and then I think basic, like a talent ID/scout developing younger players. So, like, hopefully that will work and we'll see young girls coming through. And we don't know what young girls could through and make a massive impact.
Well, there needs to be an urgency around the appointment of those, and there needs to be like a public-facing declaration that this is the low point and we're working, as opposed to just putting Greg and Niamh out. I think they're a bit...
and there needs to be the right people need to
totally.
get those jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Alison, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great day, guys.
Alison Miller gave us some thoughts on Ireland being beaten 48-0 at the weekend. We'll obviously keep covering this story. We'll come back to it later in the week. It's 25 minutes past 8. We're turning our attention to Manchester United. Andy Mitten is with us. Andy, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Okay, thank you.
A mixed week for Manchester United. It could have been a sensational week if they managed to beat Sevilla. However, a cup final against Manchester City at the very end of the season, it's going to keep things spicy in training. It's going to keep the rivalry spicy on the streets of Manchester and all around the world. So very, very important to get that win in the penalty shootout yesterday.
Yeah, it was. A June Cup final will absolutely keep things going right till the very end. And we've not always been able to say that about Manchester United in recent seasons. Remember last season, the season was over by February. Manchester United were out of the league and out of all the cups as well. And you say a mixed week, going into yesterday, it'd been a terrible week. That result in Seville was horrendous. Manchester United were completely taken apart in Andalusia on Thursday night. I was shocked by it days after. I've seen Sevilla play this season. They're not a good Sevilla side. And they scored 5 goals past Manchester United after United went up 2-0 ahead in the first leg. So that's a real shame, because that Europa League is a very good tournament, which I think was worth winning. And especially with Arsenal going out, Manchester United were favourites, but there's no way Manchester United deserved to go through. We're absolutely battered in Seville, and it just wasn't good enough at all. It really fell short of expectations. So Sunday, I got to half-time, and I'm thinking, OK, at least Manchester United are not getting destroyed here. Brighton are very, very good. And I spoke to lots of several players, coaches after the game, and they were all very complimentary about Brighton. And then it goes to penalty shootout. It could go either way. Manchester United were fortunate because it was a very, very even game. I'm really impressed by Brighton.
From United's perspective, I guess a week like this actually just reminds everybody how big the gap is to Manchester City and just how much work still needs to be done. Huge strides have been made, but there's still a load more to do.
Yeah, it's hard to reach finals. Manchester United reached the Europa League final under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, knocking out AC Milan and Roma. It wasn't difficult. People just assumed that Manchester United would get there. It showed how difficult it is in these competitions. And you look at the league table, that's the reality of it. Manchester City are clearly the strongest team. I've been very surprised at how Liverpool have fallen away this season. Less so with Chelsea, because I could see the chaos pre-season as they tried to sign anyone who'd ever registered to play association football. I just thought this is just going to be a complete mess, and it was. Arsenal have surprised me at how good they've been. They were excellent at Old Trafford earlier on in the season, and Newcastle's improvement has been ahead of schedule, if you like, and I knew they were going to get stronger. And then you've got Brighton, Aston Villa done really well too. And Tottenham, Manchester United's next game is on Thursday against Tottenham. I don't have a clue what to expect with Tottenham. One of the best games at Old Trafford this season, probably the best, was Manchester United's performance against Tottenham. And then I didn't see them playing Newcastle, but I was getting reports coming through. The 1-0 down, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. Completely crazy. But your original point is right. Manchester United are not there yet. Need to strengthen. Clearly need a number 9. That's becoming apparent in every game. The team doesn't score enough goals and needs strengthening in other areas. But Erik ten Hag has done a really good job. For his first season, he's already won a trophy. Top 4 is looking good. And I spoke to him about this after the game. He sort of reinforced the progress that he was making. It's key now to finish in the top 4. And then there's a small matter of an FA Cup final against, City.
We were covering the Forest game last weekend, and Kenny Cunningham was on co-commentary, and obviously it was Maguire and Lindelof, and I think it was maybe 5 clean sheets in a row in the Premier League for Maguire at that stage. And Kenny's view was that if United stayed with the 4 centre-backs for next season, so with Lindelof and Maguire as the backup to Martinez and Varane, that Ten Hag would be quite happy with that. And that he almost put it back in Harry Maguire, that Harry Maguire shouldn't be happy to be 3rd or 4th choice, that, you know, he should be looking to either get out or force his way into the team. When you look at the errors on Thursday night and maybe how much better than United were with even Luke Shaw playing at centre-back yesterday ahead of Maguire, what's your sense of what his future at the club is like? Because it feels at the moment like you pity him almost. Even that, I know the way he talks after the game. He talks a good game, and he still feels and sounds like he's a confident player. But he just looked a broken man on Thursday night.
Well, I spoke to him last night after the game. It wasn't for as a journalist. I just spoke to him. I saw him in the tunnel, and I had a chat with him about non-league football, like you do, and he was very relieved at that result because he's the Manchester United captain. I think he carries himself very well as a captain, but clearly footballers want to be playing football. And Manchester United fans might agree with Kenny and say, yeah, keep all of those players. And then you've got a very good defence there because Raphael Varane does pick up injuries and you need cover. Every team needs cover. You saw how much Liverpool suffered in recent years when they had defensive injuries. It completely affected the season. But from Harry Maguire's perspective, and he's given me no indication of what he wants to do next, I don't think he will be happy playing 15 games a season. And we've been here before. This was, Chris Smalling in 2018. He went to see Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and said, am I going to be playing 35 games this year? Because I'd accept that. And Ole was like, it's going to be 25 games. And he's like, I'm not happy with that. So he went to Rome and he's done really well. And he never regretted that decision. I think Harry would be expecting to play the majority of games wherever he's at. I don't think he'd get a guarantee that that's going to happen at Manchester United because he's not the first choice central defender. You also have to add in other factors. Manchester United need money, absolutely need money. Does that come from new people who own the club? But United also need money to stay within the financial fair play limits. And Harry Maguire is a player who would realise tens of millions. Certainly not the amount Manchester United paid for him with that huge fee from Leicester City. And age isn't on his side now either. But Manchester United need to sell in the summer to bring some money in to help improving the squad with the number 9 that I said. I think Harry's got a contract there. The manager absolutely likes him. When I was speaking to him last night, it was just about him being a captain. He's really aware of the club. Just the things he asks me. It's what a captain should be asking. He's really aware of what Manchester United are and the standing of the club. But all that is secondary if you're not playing matches.
I know you can't wait to get past all the football and back to the real stuff of the transfer window during the summer. Football fans, the way we look at this, it's, well, get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him, get rid of him. And there's a lot of that with underperforming Manchester United players. And again, after Thursday night, you look at David De Gea and think, well, if Erik ten Hag wants to play out from the back in that modern style with a modern goalkeeper, that's not David De Gea's strength. But he raises the issue that a lot of these players are on enormous wages, and it's not going to be easy to get rid of a lot of those players. How do you see that playing out? If they need to bring money in for various different reasons, and who knows how the ownership goes over the next few weeks, but is Erik ten Hag going to be able to get rid of the players he wants to get rid of, or would you fear he's going to end up with a bulked up squad again next season of 4 or 5 guys on massive wages, probably big egos, feeling they should be playing, but actually he doesn't want them at the club?
Difficult. And it is difficult at other big clubs, but the point is true, because Manchester United are not absolutely flying. The demand for Manchester United fringe players or players who aren't featuring all the time isn't as high as it should be, and they all earn too much money. So David De Gea, the first one you mentioned, another one I spoke to after the game, spoke to him at length actually, spoke really well. He was the best paid goalkeeper in the world when he renewed his current contract. Is he the best goalie in the world? Probably not. He's had an offer for a new contract. It's a lot lower than the last one. Erik ten Hag wants to keep him. He feels that he's learning, even at this late stage in his career, to play the Manchester United way that he wants. I thought he had a very good game against Brighton. I thought he had a really bad game against Seville, but he's had a good season. I know he divides Manchester United fans, but I don't think replacing the goalkeeper is the absolute priority at the moment. And if you do, then suddenly you might be paying 60 million to bring in another goalkeeper, and maybe that money is better spent outfield. And there's a good person in the dressing room. He's been there for a long time. I can see why he causes doubts. The transfer window, you ought to see the state of the messages I get on Instagram every single day.
You should publish them sometime. You should just do a
I'm sure we're breaching all sort of privacy stuff, but it's like, please, can you give me a private podcast where you just outline exactly who Manchester United are going to be signing this summer?
Andy, you need to set up an OnlyFans for that stuff. That's where the money comes in, rolling in.
I'll give you as much time as you want. Tell you everything. You've got other players there like Scott McTominay, who probably would get a lot of money, who probably does want to play more football, who probably would do a good job at somebody like Newcastle United. But again, Ten Hag is probably going to want to keep as many players as possible. There's players who will leave. Phil Jones has not been playing, his contract's up, and it might be for the managers to call time on the Manchester United career of people like Anthony Martial. But this idea of getting rid of 15 players, nah. That's not happening. This is just going to be a normal summer of pruning the squad and improving the squad. And Ten Hag needs to be backed to continue doing the good job that he's doing. And if he isn't, don't be surprised if he starts looking elsewhere.
That range of outcome is still on the table while the ownership question is still up in the air, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the Glazers might be saying this is business as usual, but I go back to that first point. Manchester United need money. Getting in the Champions League will help, and it does nobody any good running down their asset. Manchester United need to remain competitive, but the ownership is the big elephant in the room. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with the stadium, with the training ground? Who's going to be taking over? Are the Glazers going to sell? We saw more protests against the Glazers at Wembley. There's a protest planned for the Aston Villa game at the weekend. The fans have made their views very, very clear about how they feel about the Glazers being in charge of Manchester United on a consistent basis, win or lose.
What's your instinct about a time frame on this, when we might know one way or another?
Honestly, don't know. Nobody knows, because the dates keep getting moved. At first, people were saying we want this to be concluded in the first quarter. I speak to people who know a lot more about business than I do, and they guide me on this, and the Glazers hold all the cards. Yes, they'd look slightly stupid if they suddenly said Manchester United are not for sale anymore, because they will be perceived to be time wasters. There's very definite offers from Qatar, from Sir Jim Ratcliffe as well. I think a worry for fans is that the Glazers take on even more debt to finance the stadium development, and the Glazers stay in charge and load more debt onto the club. That's a worry for a lot of Manchester United fans.
Andy, we'll leave it there for now. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Andy Mitten, give us some thoughts on the situation at Manchester United after their performance the weekend. They've got to be happy with the fact they're still in the Cup.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been a disaster if they'd lost that.
Well, I think off the back of Thursday night, and even the manner of the defeat to Sevilla, 2 own goals in the first leg, 2 absolutely horrific mistakes. You could even question maybe De Gea for the other goal. The header could he have done a little bit better, but such basic errors that sort of reinforced all the questions that were there about De Gea and Maguire. I find it hard to see a way back for Maguire to re-earn the confidence of Manchester United supporters that every time he's on the pitch they're not all going, uh-oh?
No, you got to get rid. But to the point, he did cost 80 million. He is on 80 million as a result of that. The agent goes in and goes, you spend a record fee for a defender. We'll have like a record amount of money. I don't know the exact number on his contract. The De Gea contract is amazing. 117 million over the last 6 seasons he's earned.
Now you got to have a good agent.
That is like, wow. An agent who is so good that somehow they managed not to get that fax through that time.
Conversations in the eye, but he's not very good with his feet. His goalkeeper doesn't need his feet. He's good with his hands. Makes the big saves. Made some big saves yesterday.
Yeah, is that good enough?
Not the way Ten Hag wants to play. Like they want to
for Ederson. Yeah, give me Ederson. Right, we will be hosting a live UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat, coming your way on the 3rd of May in the Mansion House in Dublin. We'll be joined by UEFA Champions League winners John O'Shea and Wes Brown, along with Paul Merson, Arsenal and Aston Villa legend. It's sure to be a brilliant night's entertainment. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events. We will see you on the night. Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, can't wait. In the presenter's chair.
Yeah.
Myself and Joe. It's been a while since we have co-hosted a roadshow. The last one also had 2 Manchester United legends, and that was a quiet night.
Yeah.
So I'd expect something similar this time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Shane Hannon, good morning to you. You're live from the Crucible.
Ger, Nathan. I'm feeling very, 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 very smug this morning because I'm sitting in a pretty special place. This is like how Nathan felt at Augusta, I think.
I
looks like you're on a rooftop, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought you were doing your GMAC impersonation. Oh, you're actually. Oh, yeah, okay.
We've got a selfie stick. So this is of course the now infamous table where the orange powder was.
Security's obviously still quite lax at the Crucible.
It's I'm probably the first person to have a selfie stick in this room, but it's the only way I can show you everything, and there's a lot to show you. So we'll do a little walk around. I'm sure you've been watching the snooker and keeping on top of it all, have you?
Yeah, watching John Higgins last night.
This is the very seat where Higgins.
Nothing that ages you as much as watching snooker and going, John Higgins is. I remember watching John Higgins when I was actually a kid. And there he is, still at the top of his game.
He's even older than you.
For our podcast listeners, tell us what we're seeing.
Yeah, so we're essentially on the Crucible floor here at the moment. So you've got it's basically just myself and the Hoover in the Crucible at the moment. So you've got table 1 behind me here, where Ronnie O'Sullivan was playing the other day, and of course the orange powder incident happened. Robert Milkins and C. Jawi's names still on the seats there last night. And table 2 over here, where, as you were saying, Nathan, John Higgins was victorious and imperious in his win over Karen Wilson. Like, you wouldn't back against John Higgins going all the way now. This is the thing. The draws kind of open up a little bit for Ronnie O'Sullivan, and on the other side, I'd have to say, he's got Luca Brissell in the quarterfinals next, and Luca Brissell's a player who hasn't really been at this stage of the Crucible before the World Championship, so I'm not going to back against Ronnie O'Sullivan. I don't think anyone is. But to just be standing down here, like, I get chills every time I walk in and I'm taking a seat, but to be down on this, like, this is the exact place where, you know, Ken Doherty won that World Championship in '97, and Alex Higgins stood literally right here when he was holding back the tears, hugging his child in '82. You know, it's the room where Ronnie O'Sullivan had that 5-minute, 20-second maximum. There's just so much history. So I was slagging Nathan a little bit last week in the office, going, Jesus, the man won't stop talking about Augusta. But when you're in a sporting theatre, literally like this, and you think of all the history that it's been here, it's a privilege and an honour to be here, to be honest.
The one thing they don't do at Augusta is block off half the history for you when you're in attendance. I do wonder this when I'm watching on TV. So obviously the 2 tables are beside each other and they put down the screen in between. As a viewing experience, how that works, because, and even for the players, when you're hearing the cheers from the other table and the applause just as they're about to go, what's that dynamic like?
Strange one. Yeah, because, and there are even certain seats, like you see some of the seats behind me here. So the divider, I don't know if you'll be able to see the divider if I pull it up. It's mainly just lights to see, but the divider is above me. So there's some seats that would essentially be able to see both tables, which I'm sure is a little bit off-putting. But and sometimes the claps do maybe put off the other table a little bit, but I think it's better this way. You know, there's nothing like the Crucible when it gets to the 1 table setup. So from the semi-finals onwards, there's just the one table, and it's cavernous. Like it's quite tight with the two tables. Like you see, there's not much room here between the. Try and stand between them. There's only a couple of meters at most between the two tables.
Yeah.
But a lot of players kind of give out about that, and even John Higgins, when he started playing at the Crucible, he hated it. I think his first game at the Crucible when he was younger, a teenager, was a 10-3 defeat, and he said it was too tight and he hated it. And he grew to love it, became a 4-time world champion. And I think that's the thing about the Crucible. Once you get used to the venue, to the experience, to the tight spaces as well, I mean, there's no stopping you. Ronnie O'Sullivan's going for a record 8th title as well this year, so it's I would say as a viewing experience, it's up there with anything I've ever been at. Like, I've bumped into a lot of Irish people over here this weekend as well, and there's only 900 seats, I think, so they could probably fill a theatre that's much bigger. But to be honest, the Crucible Theatre, the history that's here, Sheffield as well is a brilliant city to host it. I don't think they could ever move it out of here.
I was going to ask about the capacity. It doesn't look that big, and 900 is intimate.
For sure, and you can kind of sense that as well. Like when the players come out, even yesterday, and this kind of it leads into the viewing experience question as well. Kieran Wilson was clearly playing terribly against John Higgins yesterday in that 13-2 defeat. But there were little moments where you could hear his cue. You're so close to the action that you could hear it ping off his cue, which was indicating that there was something wrong with the wood. I mean, Ken Doherty has spoken very, very well about this, and some people might see it as a boring conversation, but wood is clearly a living thing. It's not like these cues are made of carbon or graphite or something else. So if something goes wrong with the cue, there's nothing they can do. It's like Stephen Hendry lost his cue or had his cue damaged on an airplane years ago and was never the same player afterwards. But being so close to the action, you can hear little things like that, and the reaction from Kieran as he's banging his cue on the ground. These are things you don't pick up on television, maybe. So,
is wood a living thing when it's turned into a cue? I would have thought it's no longer a living thing by then.
The wand shop in Harry Potter, like picking up your first cue, is a pretty special moment, Nathan. It's like a golf club, you know. It's one of those things. But just being this close, like literally, this is the front row, and I mean,
get up on the table, Shane. Get up on the table.
The temptation is real. You've obviously covered it for me. They knew I was coming. No green powder or any other colour with me this morning. The security has actually been ramped up fairly significantly as well.
Clearly not.
I was going to say, I mean, look, I think everybody's wondering, how did you, what? How did you, like, do you have permission to be there?
I do. World Snooker were very, very kind to me. Rob Marsh was actually behind me as one of the security guys who's let me in. They're brilliant. Like, I have to say, their relationship with the media as well, World Snooker, is second to none, and that's probably because it's one of those sports that just isn't at the level that it was in terms of interest in the 1980s. So it's they've been very good to me, Ger, and I'm literally
blink twice if they can't hear you, Shane. Blink. Okay. World Snooker are amazing. We love them.
People.
Thank you.
Are they going to let you play? That's what I want.
I don't even want to touch the table. It's one of those things. I literally, like, even if they said, "Oh, you can touch it there," and not a chance. Greasy hands. There's no need to go near it.
All right.
But
you can watch
be this
them.
close is a special privilege.
Shane, good stuff. Thanks a million. Enjoy the rest of your time in Sheffield. Is he there for the whole thing?
No, I think he's back
before the final
Wednesday.
Right. All right. Up next, Anthony Moyles in studio. First, Nicola Friday speaking in the aftermath of the England defeat. Back after this.
Yes, just your opinion on that performance.
Yeah, look, still, like, we still would have liked to get on the board, definitely, and there's definitely areas for us to improve on, but you can't. I'm extremely proud of the heart and the fight that the girls showed to hold out an English team of that calibre in the second half to the 70th minute. I think we really showed the grit and the determination and fight that we have as a group, and I'm proud of the girls for that.
And I suppose it's the most cohesive we've seen you, I'd say, this campaign so far. Going into Scotland now, how are you all feeling?
Yeah, like, there's definitely 100% areas we can improve on. Our line-out definitely is something we want to get functioning more and get more return out of. But definitely, I think we saw glimpses of our backs playing really well today in terms of getting the ball to the edges and letting our quality wingers have a crack. And our defence definitely wasn't improved on from the first 3 matches as well. So there's positives, but there's areas that we're going to 100% work on over the next week, because we want to go to Scotland firing.
And a big crowd for you again today. How did the 16th man help you along?
Brilliant. Like, we've had 2 amazing matches here in Cork in terms of support, and it really does mean the world to us, especially at this time for us as a group, that to have people showing up and really supporting and getting behind us, and it really means the world to us. Nice.
I'm alright for life.
Do you think Limerick have a bit of an issue with discipline?
Backgrounds, no, you're welcome back. It's 8:49 this morning. You're watching OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Anthony Moyles is with us in studio. Anthony, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Ger.
Really? How are you?
I'm a long-suffering Spurs fan, Ger, so throw that into the mix.
As the kids would text you okay, hon?
Yeah, you okay. Difficult weekend. Spurs, we'll just park those. You know what? The amazing thing is, I saw some people mention it, very little enthusiasm, very little excitement, and a real sense of trepidation amongst Meath supporters before that game. And it was there for a reason.
It isn't a shock. It's a shock, but it's not a shock.
Correct. It's not a shock. And I suppose there's two things. You can, I suppose, concentrate in the game. The game, Offaly were full value for the game, as you know, they showed during the league. Meath got out of jail against them, and even last year in the championship, Offaly would have felt that they were probably in that game and should have got some kind of a result out of the game. And again, you have a situation, I suppose, where. Are this Meath team, Colin O'Rourke was saying they deserve to be in the Tailteann Cup? Well,
that's correct.
That's correct. Yeah. The results don't lie. You take the two results out from the very first two games in the league, when they caught Cork in a bit of a shootout. Could have easily lost that game. Could you be facing Division 3 now and Tailteann Cup? And then you would absolutely rightly say, well, this is the competition for them. Is it the competition for them? In other words, so do they go, they play some teams, they get a bit of confidence, they maybe get to a final, maybe they win it. The players actually see that instead of being at the other end of getting drubbings, they're actually on the opposite end. There's a bit of confidence built, they get a bit of camaraderie built, and they actually realise, Gina, you know what, we're not as bad footballers as we thought we were, or as people say we are. And maybe it gives the management team a time to then actually just to try to build and solidify and actually make them a unit that can advance next year. But my worry is the opposite could happen, actually. I think, I'm hearing loads of stuff, and of course rumours and everything else. I'm not that close to the camp, so I can't, and people will say, well, which I'm not, so. But I'm hearing rumours. I've seen some things and I've heard some things that would kind of give me alarm bells, to be honest with you. And alarm bells around the camp itself, how happy the camp is, and how solid they are as a group, and how much they're willing to kind of put the shoulder to the wheel. So that's a big worry.
Okay, are there players who aren't playing in the panel at the moment who are better than the players? Is that one of the issues, that they don't have the best available, or is this actually the best players largely, with maybe one or two exceptions?
I think largely it is probably the best of players, bar one or two. Like we've spoken before about Conor McGill. Okay, so we've already touched that. But I suppose there's just a few decisions that I think, I know Colin was saying no excuses, but they've kind of rattled through all the excuses during the league: conditioning, inexperience, this, various different things. But when I look at the team yesterday, I'll give you an example. So there's a young lad, Owen Harkin, who played in the Kildare game, the last game in the league, which was a pretty important game, you would have felt. He starts that game, but then after the game he's dropped from the whole panel,
right?
Which is a very strange decision. So he's out. He starts. He's obviously embedded in the 15. Then he's gone out of 30. Young Coffey plays yesterday, who saw, I think, little or no league time. Ronan Ryan, who is a fellow who plays with Summerhill, who were in the county final, who were one of the perennial senior teams in Meath. He gets very little game time during the league, but then he starts full back yesterday. You also get 4 debutants. Just kind of some strange decisions that you kind of scratch your head and say, well, if he was going to be the full back and he hasn't really played full, would he not have played full back all the way throughout the league, right? Then, as we've said on this team, you build your team from the defence. You make sure you're rock solid there, and then you worry about the other end. We don't have a marquee forward. We don't have a Conor McManus. We haven't had one for a long time. So therefore, you need to say, well, this is a collective effort, and the most we're going to probably try to get is 112, 113 in a game, 14, 15 points. We're not going to get 20 odd points, and that's just it.
So do Meath have
15, 20 players that are better than Tailteann Cup, that are top 16 in Ireland, talent-wise, right now?
Well, when you look across the board, there's probably 6 to 8 teams. Like, there's the top 8, right? And then there's another 8 who are just making the most out of what they have. I don't think Meath are making the most out of what they have. Right, so I think a team can be set up, and a team can be to say, right, well, you know what, we're going to make it very difficult. So you look at Down yesterday. I thought that was a really good game. Donegal put a lot into that game, considering all the stuff that has gone before. They were well within the game. They could have won it, but Down came with an energy, with a purpose, with a setup, with a style of play that they said, by hook or by crook, we're going to die on our sword today, and we're going to go. And as it happens, they won the game. That's a Division 3 team versus, essentially a Division.
Yeah, I mean, they've traditionally a Division 1 team over the last number of years, and who still have largely a playing squad who beat Kerry in the league.
Yeah, exactly. So, so are they making the most out of what they have? Yes. And by the way, and Down has been a complete disaster the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Loads written.
So you can't turn it around quickly is the other thing.
Well, you can, but I think, again, Conor Laverty, what they've done under 20s the last few years, they've obviously got the county board right behind. And I think people say, oh, the county, it does. It starts from the top. There's this horrible thing going on in Meath for the last number of years, and it started with Andy McEntee, which was they felt Andy was picking an awful lot of South Meath players, right? Which is where the big, I suppose, population zones are. The Ratotes, the Dunboynes, the Dunham or Ashburns. But it's just a virtue of numbers, right? Now, when you go from this thing, he should be picking North Meath players, it's this thing of, well, just pick the best players.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter where your father's from. Doesn't matter where your mother's from. Doesn't matter where you could be from Timbuktu. Yeah. Come in and this whole thing of and I heard Colin, and I have to say it was, I know it was a bit in jest on the Tommy Tiernan thing, but this thing of, we're going to collect all the Dublin flags and we're going to burn them. I don't know if it goes on in Kildare, right? Kildare are in the same boat, right? Loads of border towns across Dublin, loads of people, migrating into Kildare. But you know what? Embrace it. Best of luck. Fantastic. Be inclusive rather than kind of be the other way. Because I tell you, people might say it doesn't really matter. It does matter. It does matter. You have to have a sense of purpose. Meath is not what it was 25 years ago. It's a different county. It's a different county. It's full of different accents. It's full of different people. But you have to pull that together. And if you don't pull it together, and your sense of purpose then is to make the best of who we have, you're going absolutely nowhere, in my view. It starts there, I think.
You don't want to be too critical of somebody who has decided to give it their all this year in what Colin O'Rourke has done. But if you look at what Duignan did, Duignan went and got involved at county board level. And actually, maybe if you want to make long-term significant changes, you can be a sticking plaster with the inter-county side. But if the county board is the way that it has been, with the fight with the management between the under-20s and the senior team, with having to run for your own job again that Andy McEntee had, maybe that would have been better for Colin to spend his time doing that as opposed to trying to come in and fix the team.
Yeah, I'm not laying the blame at Colin's door entirely. Absolutely not. I'm saying it's a county thing. As a matter of fact, it's a
who we are.
It's who we are, exactly. And I know a number of years ago people were looking to say, well, who we need to get the Meathness back in Meath. But it has changed, and I'm not saying Colin is out of touch, but maybe even I'm out of touch. But these are new, these are young lads who have grown up in a different county, right? Yeah. Who have grown up with the behemoth at the door, and who have regularly set themselves up for a tanking every time they've gone in against. And by the way, make no bones about it, that's the way it's going to go again this year, right? For whoever's left. Unless I'm absolutely, you see what they do to Laois yesterday. Yeah. Right? The writing's on the wall.
I wouldn't say many Kildare fans are particularly excited about the fact that there's a trip to Croker to face the Dubs. And our reward might be to drop into the Tailteann Cup in the aftermath of that. And you know what, maybe that might be the thing for this team and for everybody to the one thing I'd say about Kildare is that they do have talented footballers who it doesn't feel like we're getting the best out of them at the moment.
Well, you're talking about the second 8 teams, the purpose that they have, and they're well organised and well coached. when you look at what O'Rourke has brought in around him, so, you know, the other pundit that left, Kevin McStay, goes into Mayo and he brings this superstar lineup of coaches in around him. Even reading the analysis today of Galway, it's like, oh, well, this was a Cian O'Neill game plan executed to perfection. Like, Pádraig Joyce brings in one of the top coaches alongside him. Mark McHugh goes in down at Roscommon. Is there a sense that around me that maybe O'Rourke at the county board underestimated the coaching nous that was needed as well?
I don't know. Garrigan came in, who was one of the main guys with the ladies team, and has a good CV and quite a good CV, I believe, with regard to coaching and different teams. You know, Stephen Bray and Barry Callahan are in there. They've got a strong backroom team, but you know, look, again, without knowing the intricacies of what happens in there, you would have felt that the first thing we would do is we would get our defensively set up strong. That's the first thing. Let's make sure, as all teams have, be it Mayo or whoever it is, you know, Kerry in the last number of years, let's set up defensively strong and then let's look after the other end as we go. But it just hasn't transpired that way. I think the idea was we'll be a traditional setup, we'll get the ball in early, we'll kind of go man on man at the back, and we'll see how we go. And that has not worked, right? It hasn't worked. And it's very difficult to change that midstream. Very, very difficult.
Well, it's difficult to retain credibility with the group when you're saying we tried that thing and it didn't work and now we have to go to something different, but we haven't done any practice for it. So you know, let's work it out.
Yeah, and there's probably also an acceptance, Ger, to be honest with you. You know, I've been at plenty of Meath games where you hear fellas saying, kick it in, get rid of it, you know, because they don't like teams holding on to it. There has to be an acceptance as well that, you know what, you might go 4 or 5 minutes with absolutely boring football just to retain possession, but that's just it.
That's the game.
That's the game.
The game doesn't change. So we should talk briefly about Offaly. We will do more on Offaly during the week. It's an incredible achievement for them. And on the other side, they're going to be up against Louth, who came back from the dead against Westmeath. And you'd hope that Westmeath didn't have in the back of their heads, well, it doesn't really matter to us because we're already through. Because like them beating Louth and them beating Offaly in a semi-final would have been great for them to get a chance against the Dubs and then to catapult into. And it would have felt, so it feels a little bit like Westmeath haven't built on the Tailteann Cup success. Now, maybe they shock us with a big home win against somebody in the round robin in Sam Maguire, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't. That's going to be a massive kick for them yesterday. Like, that's a game that they should really see out. It's a game that I'm sure they were thinking at half time, we keep this tight second half. Yeah, they'll come back, they'll have their purple patch. There was probably a few warning signs there though in the first half. Louth had 2 or 3 goal chances that the keepers made good saves on, and there was warning signs to say actually they could slip in here and get in behind us, which they did then repeatedly in the second half. But yeah, as you say, building on, you would have thought that Tailteann Cup would have been a springboard for them, and it hasn't been. Louth, on the other hand, you know, like I saw Mickey Hart saying they were just playing for pride in the second half. Well, you know, the reports from it were saying real lack of intensity in the first half, allowing Westmeath just to kind of run through them. You know, no real kind of zip, no energy. And probably a little bit of expectation on them too. You know, they were coming into this game with everyone saying, oh, you know, where could they go here? And they've done a great league. And all of a sudden then you're like, whoa, we're 1-7, 1-8, whatever it was down. So to be fair to them, that's you know, they could have gone the other way, but they stuck in it, and once they got going, they've got some seriously talented footballers.
That's the thing,
and they've got a lot of power and a lot of pace. And they actually then played a very different style where they opened up in that second half to what they have, because they had to chase the game. But yeah, you know, remarkable result by them.
Let's talk about Galway, because Galway handled their business against Roscommon. There was, again, a purple patch at the start of the second half where Roscommon created and scored, and it felt like they were seizing the initiative of the game. We'd seen Roscommon finish games really strongly, but for whatever reason, Roscommon couldn't keep going with that. And I didn't really know what to make of Galway's performance. It required a massive slice of luck with the ball coming back down to Comer for him to score the goal, and that just seemed to knock the stuffing out of Roscommon, which I didn't expect. So I don't know what.
There was a good bit of analysis on the Sunday game last night of Galway's reaction to conceding the goal and holding on to possession for pretty much 2.5 minutes and just recycling it and stalling that bit of maturity that Galway now have of in-game management.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a kick out that gets spilled, and if Conor Cox catches it instead of slips, and Cox is just off, just off the bench, and maybe if it had happened 5 minutes later, there would have been a second goal for them. And so like a little bit of that I think is post-fact analysis, because
I thought there's two things I think that really stand out for you. Galway, there is a maturity with Galway. Joyce understands that certain aspects of the game, such as Shane Walsh being essentially nearly marked out of the game yesterday, that he needs a foil in his forward line, and that foil is Burke, who I thought was absolutely fantastic yesterday. So people will look at his performance and say, well, what exactly? But he's a link man. He stitches an awful lot of stuff together for them. He presents himself, and then he literally will hand pass left or right and kick pass. He brings other players into it, and what he does is he generally stays in the D. So that's where he does all of his work. He's got a really smart brain, but they were definitely thinking to themselves, you know what, we're kicking on here. I thought Roscommon were a bit lacklustre first half. They didn't have their usual zip, their usual energy. When they started in the second half, they really came at them.
Yeah.
Galway looked at it 6s and 7s, but they wrestled it back. And I think even pre the goal, which was a slice of luck, they had already kind of said, right, calm this down. Burke had actually come out around midfield. So he ventured out the field, and he just got on the ball and just kind of said, listen, let's take it handy, as you say, Nathan, and the goal was, look, it was a poacher's goal. It was what you'd want from Comer. But Joyce will definitely look at it and kind of think, we're not a million miles ahead here, and we still have work to do.
Yeah.
And Roscommon should look at it and say, well, actually, we had a terrible first half. Like, Murta was shockingly bad. Nothing would go right for them in the first half. As I say, they had no energy where they usually have from their half backs. Fellas tearing up the field. All of a sudden, the second half, they were getting scores from fullback, cornerback, halfback, which is what they've been doing. So Roscommon will say, listen, we'll never be, or hopefully we won't be as bad like again in that first half, and we need to take more from what we did in the second half. But it's definitely Galway. I don't think are the finished article yet, and I think he still has a lot of work to do.
It's interesting what you're saying about Ian Burke. Like, are there many better forwards at the moment at making their other forwards look good than Ian Burke?
He was up there. He's kind of in the Paddy Clifford mode, but Clifford now has actually what Paddy has been doing a lot, because fellas man mark him a lot. He's dropping deeper to get involved and kind of quarterbacking it from there. Whereas Burke actually stays in the mix, which is really, really good. So what he's able to do there is, people are expecting the ball to go into Comer when actually it doesn't. It goes into him. And he feeds Comer on loops or on runs or on fast runs, and Walsh. So he's certainly, for a guy that kind of was out in the wilderness a bit, had a great couple of years, a number of years ago, then went out into it. He's changed his game, where he was always kind of a fella who was inside. You put ball into him and he'd take his man on. He's you watch him yesterday. I'd say he hardly took a solo or a bounce. Every time he got the ball, he just looked to ship it.
Roscommon are in pot 3, Mayo are in pot 3. That was the whole point that we were making the whole way along. It doesn't matter. I guess Roscommon will be happier that they've had this extra game and they've measured themselves. Maybe they feel a bit better about life than Mayo do this morning. I don't know. It's like...
yeah, it's hard to know.
I feel quite good about life, I'll be honest with you, so I wouldn't worry about that, Ger.
It's hard to know. I don't think they'll be massively disappointed, Ger, because I think when they really look back on the game, but I never felt the sense yesterday, even with the, as you say, the slice of luck, I thought they had put a massive amount of effort into that 10 or 15 minutes to get back. And they went one up, I think, at one stage, didn't they? They went one up. But I just felt that they had kind of, because they flagged after that. And,
yeah.
They looked like they were kind of... Now, the game was still in the melting pot with 3 or 4 minutes to go, even though they were 2 or 3 behind. Galway didn't put them to the sword as I thought they would have. But I think in Galway's muscle memory, Galway gave them a lot of respect. And Galway kind of said, you know what, these fellas have got the ability to catch us out.
Yeah.
So Galway kind of also said, well, what we have, we hold here, and they didn't go too crazily offensive in that last kind of 7 or 8 minutes. Now Comer got the fisted score, but they were kind of saying, we're going to just make sure that we don't concede goals here. And they very nearly did, but I don't think Roscommon are going to be thereabouts. Like, they've massively impressed me.
Armagh, again, handled their business, and Ulster has been tricky for McGeeney provincial championships have been tricky for McGeeney in his managerial career. I don't know if that's coincidence or it's just been the luck of the draw over the years, but they've got to get over Down to get into an Ulster final, and this team feels like they would benefit from that. I mean, I'm kind of going against myself here, and his record in the qualifiers is sensational. So, do they need to beat Down? Do they need to, like, is that part of their season, their story?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they handle business, but the people were talking about Cavan, the amount of shots Cavan had, and people say, oh well, Armagh people will say, well, they were shooting from wide angles. Our defence did what they needed to do, make them shoot way out left and right, make them shoot under pressure. But I think they had 30 odd shots. That's a lot of shots. And what Down have fellas who can kick from the arc. Down have guys who can come out on the loop, and if they won't do that, I tell you what they'll do. They'll break really quickly, and they run one touch, fellas coming off the shoulder. So I think this is a really, really, really tricky game for McGeeney. I think it's a very, very. It's not going to be a banana skin if they lose, but this is a game that I think offers him a completely different challenge. Cavan, I thought, were lacklustre. From the goals, you can see that their defence were, nearly walking back. They didn't tag runners, similar to the Donegal situation. And Armagh did what they needed to do. And I often feel, and I know we've said this in the last while, Armagh nearly set themselves out to meet every single opponent. They kind of changed their game slightly to meet that particular opponent. They may go more defensive, they may go more offensive, they may decide we're playing a running game. And it's sometimes made a paralysis by analysis, that they're not just go out and play your own game sometimes.
So good
maybe
in Croker last year. Do you know? I do wonder maybe.
Yeah. Like you've missed that kind of Rian O'Neill on the square and big balls going in early and him going up fetching them, and you haven't kind of seen that. Now maybe they're keeping it back. You wouldn't know, but at some time that's going to have to come out, and I would feel that's going to have to come out against Down, because Down are very, very good at creating, and they did it with Donegal. They just trap you and then they go on the break really fast. So it's a tricky one for them. But Down, full value, and look, Armagh looked after business, as you say.
Okay.
The Rian O'Neill clearance the moment of the weekend, unbelievable.
Savage. Even just to get himself into that position, but to understand that the only place that this shot can go is here, so therefore I have to get across to it. Most fellas would stand up and just look and say,
and to not even just palm it back into trouble or anything.
Yeah,
to have the awareness to be able to get it out.
Yeah, Ethan Rafferty might be in trouble in nets.
We talked briefly about Down and the quality of their performance, but it does go to show what's possible when there is alignment between the clubs, the inter-county manager. Obviously, he had a big reputation as a manager coming in. There was high expectations. The league was a bit in and out, but ultimately, I think he got exactly what he wanted from it. And again, to Nathan's point earlier, it does show how quickly you can turn things around if you get the right people in the room and say, "This is what our ambition is. Let's go," and everybody goes.
Well, he had a big reputation, but he'd only played, I think, a year before, so he put himself out there. Young guy, young family. You're talking about this fella is putting himself up here for, if it doesn't go well, he's going to get absolutely ripped to shreds. And a lot of people might have said, with all the turmoil that's going on, maybe I'll give it a year or two or 3 or 4 years. He could have said, maybe when I'm 40 odd, I'll decide to take this. He did. It was a brave move by him, Ger, because they were an absolute mess. They started to show a little bit of green shoots, but the Kilcoo thing, obviously, the trust of the players, and them all focused on the North Star and all going in the one direction. Everyone, county board, everyone. And it just shows you when it is. That's why would be my worry for Donegal. I think Aidan O'Rourke, got Donegal and probably potentially is squeezing the last out, because my worry would be that unravels very quickly and Donegal could slide, and could slide quite rapidly, which is a worry.
You want Donegal if you're so they're going to be in pot 4. As it stands, I think there's a few other results that might be able to. I don't think they can get into pot 3. Maybe they can, but you wouldn't mind having Donegal in your group if you're one of the top teams. You're like, that's grand. I'm chalking that down as a victory.
I think you'd be fairly confident. Yeah, because that was a big effort, as I say. I do think they genuinely were. You could see the endeavour they were putting in, the chasing back. They slipped it a couple of times, and there was nearly this force of nature that Down were just going to win that game. And when you have that that weight that has been going on in the county for the last 3 to 4 months with all the stuff, it just comes at you, and it comes at you, of course, at the wrong times. And people can say, oh well, that wouldn't really make a difference. It does make a difference. It makes a difference in your preparation, makes a difference in everything. You know, it makes a difference in questioning yourself. Did we make the right move with Paddy Carr? It's on us if this goes awry. It's just noise. It's a distraction, and you don't need that coming into a game. So yeah, if you got them, I think you'd be fairly happy having them in the pot.
Dublin, it was 4-15 in the first half, I think, but they scored, and 15 points only in the second half. They took their foot off the gas, clearly. But I think a few things were important in that. Mannion started, McCaffrey started. Like, the thing that we need to see from Dublin is that those players have game time and they're fit by the time All-Ireland quarter-final happens. Yeah. Actually, nothing really matters up to that point. But once the quarter-finals arrive, is Con fit, which he wasn't last year against Kerry, they'll have Mannion and they'll have Chet McCaffrey, and suddenly they have strengthened that almost directly because of that.
Well, I think the chairman of the Leinster Council made his obligatory half-time visit to the Dublin dressing room to say, lads, look, seriously, take a handy, will you? To win a few subs there, someone. But it's you know, Howard comes on, bangs over one of his outside of the right from midfield. Looks lively again, looks strong, looks lean. They take James McCarthy off to give him a bit of a break. Colin Pascal running the show at 11, which is very, very interesting. I saw his name on the team sheet and I said to myself, is he going to start? Because I actually think Pascal has unbelievable amount of talent. But I've seen him over the last year or two with Dublin, and he's like, if you remember Ballyboden went on the big run, like he was imperious that year, you know, like unbelievably good, massive speed, great ability, really, really tidy on the ball, well able to take a score. And I felt over the last while that he's just come in and has been a bit player, you know, shifting passes on rather than going for scores himself. But obviously over the last 3 to 4 weeks, and actually 1 or 2 of the last league games, he came on and was actually being a bit more selfish. Right. But he was very, very good yesterday.
Sometimes the penny drops for players in their mid-20s.
Exactly, it can happen. Yeah, but you know,
and they've had too many players like that over the last 3 or 4 years. It's sort of why there's been that bit of decline.
Yeah, and who haven't put their hand up.
You expect them to kick on, but it's the same guys to rely on.
Exactly.
Does that change Kilkenny's role in any way?
I think it probably does. You know, I think what it'll do is it can. I think they've missed that focus of an 11. Because Kilkenny does this roving role where he shifts from, you know, east to west all the time. Like they need a guy who has pace, who if they look up and they need to hit an out ball, he has the ability to go and be that out ball. And I think and also a guy who can, you know, I think Kilkenny can nearly be a foil now in the full forward line where he can drift out, get involved if he want, but they also himself, and you wouldn't fancy leaving himself and Con inside in the full forward line.
Because then you can lorry ball in from anywhere.
Correct.
Now, it looked like they dropped Kilkenny for the league final against Derry, and he comes on after 5 minutes because there's an injury, and then gets in the team for this. So I don't know, but just very quickly, the subs bench that came on: Brian Howard, Owen Murchan, Cormac Costello, Dean Rock, Craig Diaz.
Never heard of them.
What have you done for me lately?
You know,
yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'd have them number 1. But then obviously didn't even talk about Kerry and Kerry's game against Tip, where again, I don't know how good it is for Tipperary. I don't know how good it is for Laois. Everybody had the chance to fix this, and no one wanted to fix it. So
we are where we are.
Cry me a river, lads.
Yeah.
Kerry also very good, it turns out, and Clifford's like. It must be hard for David Clifford to be that excited about these games at this stage, where it's like, I have fish to fry in the summertime in Croke Park. These are not fish.
You'd love if we had players of that arrogance, if he actually was just, that was the attitude in the dressing room beforehand. Really, do you need me today?
Jack, do you really, like, you know, I'm busy. You know, things to do.
Anthony, good stuff.
Cheers, lads.
17 minutes past 9 this morning. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shave or your money back Neon Night Edition available now. Some highlights on the OTB podcast network for you today. Post-match reaction from Roscommon and Galway. Our Sunday paper reviews: Kieran Cunningham and Cliona Foley with Joe, and Ollie Canning's reaction to Galway's win against Wexford. Follow OTB across our social channels and subscribe to the OTB podcast network wherever you get your podcasts. After the ad break, former Waterford hurler Noel Connors talking about their narrow defeat to the All-Ireland champions Limerick. First, here is Tommy Walsh talking to Cathal Minogue after that game yesterday. Back after these.
That second half though, that felt championship, didn't it?
It did.
we were saying to Cahill, like it didn't seem like it seemed like more of a league atmosphere, because as you said, it was a home game for Waterford, and in fairness, they're looking to the future. They're building up Welsh Park so they can get the big crowds in and going down the years. They're looking at the future, young hurlers coming through, so they have to take a little bit of pain for a year or two. So they came for their home game, and there was about 3,000 or 4,000 probably Waterford supporters here. Huge numbers of Limerick supporters, because they're, I suppose, on the train now at the moment. They just want to win everything that they can win. But that second half was definitely magic, because if you have two teams going at it and it's tight, I think the level of expectancy for every county when they're playing in Limerick is they want a performance. I don't think we're going to beat them, we want a performance. And it was just in the second half, it looked like maybe Waterford were going to win it, because the whole thing shifts. You're a man up, you know, Limerick at 14 men, Waterford at 15, suddenly you're coming into, there's only 2 points in it, and you say, listen, this is there for us. So maybe it's just a shift in confidence, and everybody got behind Waterford, and you know, they went to the very end and they had 1 or 2.
You're listening
to OTB AM. The Football Pod are hitting the road again, and we're delighted to announce that we're heading to Killarney for our first big show of the summer. All with thanks to AIB.
It was quality. It was a good one.
Join us for a brilliant night of football, chat and crack, with plenty of focus on the All-Ireland champions Kerry and the contenders who are coming for their throw.
Does it keep you up at night with not winning Sam Maguire? No.
This is an exclusive off-air event, and tickets are limited, so don't delay.
We have a great show ahead. We are going to get our special guests out tonight.
Tickets are €20, including booking fee. Go to offtheball.com/event now. The Football Pod, in partnership with AIB. Check out #TheToughest for more. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
14-man Limerick eventually overcame Waterford in the Munster Hurling Championship yesterday. Noel Connors is with us now to offer some analysis on that. Noel, first off, what's the level of disappointment like in the aftermath? Because it was right there for Waterford if they'd just been a little bit calmer.
Yeah, and ironically enough, I think you've already kind of hit it right on the head. It was probably just that small bit of coolness in the brain when they got the opportunities, particularly when it came to crunch time in, we'll say, the last kind of 5-10 minutes of the first half, but more so with the last kind of like 15-20 minutes in the second half. Waterford just made poor decisions at times. But the expectation, I suppose, there probably wasn't much expectations after a relatively up and down league campaign where I think they won 2, drew 1 and lost 2. But there was probably no expectation, and I think a lot of teams, I think Tommy mentioned it yesterday on Off the Ball, that there's no expectation, I suppose, to beat Limerick. It's about the performance, and I think that's what a lot of Waterford people expected was the performance.
And so the performance was really quite good.
It was very good, and again, there's so many different variables and factors. It goes to show how, I suppose, fickle and how complex hurling and football is as a sport, in the sense that you go back 12 months ago and Waterford were doing really well in the league, and when it came to championship they were quite poor, and quite the opposite has happened now, where you had a relatively poor league campaign and yesterday hit the ground running. So there's so many different variables and reasons behind that. For whatever reason it may be, it's far beyond my pay grade to give that, but it was a great experience to be there yesterday and to see the lads really, you know, I suppose physically but also mentally and athletically match Limerick in so many different facets of the game.
An awful lot of the talk ahead of the game was about what would Davy do, and I wasn't quite buying into that he would have some sort of tactical master plan that would somehow stymie Limerick, but they did really crowd that middle area and made it very difficult from the Limerick puckouts in particular. Callum Lyons had a great game, and Cian Lynch couldn't run the show out there at all. And also he seemed to change it quite often, because one of the questions with like Limerick, if you get at them for 20 minutes, they're so good on the sideline, they'll change their tactics, that no matter what Limerick seemed to try, Waterford seemed to have an answer. So there was a real consistency to getting this right tactically throughout the game.
Absolutely, and look, I think that the Davy factor to an extent takes a lot of pressure off the players, as in everyone talks about Davy and what he's going to do, where the players can just go turn up the train and train as hard as they can, and that's actually very beneficial as players, because the expectation again is not on you, it's on, you know, your coaching staff and the management. And And look, we're all well aware, like Davey has been around the block, he's been at schools level, the college level, club level, inter-county level, Munster, Leinster, etc. So he's well aware, and he has probably as much experience as the next person when it comes to that. I was very, very impressed how well they set up, particularly in the first half when Limerick had 15 and Waterford had 15. Yes, the game had changed quite dramatically when Limerick went down and Jack Fagan basically stood on the left-hand side where Limerick couldn't run into space. That obviously changed it to an extent where they couldn't get the out ball onto either side. But even in the first half, they set up really well. Like, genuinely, Limerick struggled. I was sitting right on the 21 and Limerick struggled to find passes. Whereas before, you're hitting Gerard Hegarty, you're hitting Tom Morrissey, you're hitting Keane Lynch into space, and they couldn't do that. It's the first time in a long time where I could honestly say that I can't remember where Limerick's half-forward line didn't actually dominate in the air. And I think that's hugely important. You go back to that amazing, Kilkenny team where Kilkenny's half-back line dominated most teams. And yesterday, Waterford did very, very well on a very impressive half-forward line for Limerick.
I know everybody says last year was a complete disaster for Waterford, but they won the first day out against Tipperary, and I was just checking the score. The second day out was against Limerick, and it was 30 points to 221. So, they aren't building off nothing, even though, generally it's accepted that last year was a complete disaster and the team started to leak and it all went off the rails. But by the second round of the round robin in Munster last year, they'd won one and lost one, and they'd only lost by a couple of points to Limerick. So should we have expected them to go right toe to toe with this Limerick side? They're probably not that far away, really.
They're not, and ironically enough, when they played Limerick, was it last year, 2 years ago, up at the Gaelic grounds, they could have very easily won it up there also. I just think that you kind of judge, your expectation is based on last year's championship. And coming towards the end of last year's championship, I remember watching the Clare match up in Ennis, and I wasn't at the match. I remember watching it, I was kind of saying to myself, just seems to be a complete lack of energy, completely unstructured, didn't really know what they were doing. And look, again, there's so many different variables, and I'm not in the inner circle to give you a good enough reason for that. But it just didn't seem to be themselves. Now, I know Jamie went off and Tyg went off, both of them within 15 minutes of that match as well. Two massive players for Waterford. But for some reason, the latter half of the championship was very, very poor. And maybe because we don't expect that as well. Maybe your point is very valid in the sense we don't expect Waterford to be that poor. There's always an expectation to be thereabouts for the last 5 or 10 minutes of a game. But that obviously wasn't the case towards the latter end of the championship.
Did you see enough then in the performance yesterday to suggest that they'll be able to learn and absorb the lessons where the opportunities are there, where some of the shots are just a little bit rushed when they didn't need to be? They actually had plenty of time on the ball for some of those wides, and I think that'll be the most disappointing thing.
Yeah, and I suppose it's easy for us to kind of talk about it now. It was like a dagger to the heart at times when they had the opportunity, they had time, they had room, and particularly in the first half, I think there was about 10 minutes left in the first half, and Waterford had 3 bad wides to the left-hand side. Each one of them more or less hit the exact same place on the left-hand side, where the ball went up the far end of the field and someone like, Keane Lynch got on the ball and was straight over the bar. But we really had to work for our chances and our scores, and we didn't take them at times. And listen, this is not to kind of take an individual out of, the whole, whatever was 4 minutes in the first half and 7 in the second half, so 81 minutes. It's not one individual moment, but even with, I think it was time was up. There's about, 1 minute of added time. We were in that 1 minute, and Austin got a ball on around the 65 and ran with it. And he seemed to have a lot of space, but then he ran with it. And if he actually put the ball over the bar, we would have been 1 point in it with 5 minutes to go or 6 minutes to go. And I think that our backs would have been up in the sense that we had an extra man. We kind of had a momentum at that stage, but by the time that Austin had ran to the 21, Limerick had got 2 more fellas back. I think it was Kyle Hayes, and I think it could have been Darragh O'Donovan got back and basically kind of swallowed up the opportunity. Whereas if we were just that small bit cooler, hit the ball over the bar, it might be in a very different game. Again, these are the small margins we talk when it comes to championship.
What did you make of the couple of incidents involving the Limerick players that saw Gerard Hegarty sent off, and obviously the Seamus Flanagan tackle as well? There does seem to be a feeling that if Limerick aren't to win the All-Ireland this year, that it may be of their own doing, that bit of discipline that's been there maybe throughout at times, and other people say it's just toughness, it's the physicality that makes them so good. What did you make of those 2 incidents?
Ironically enough,
You didn't see it?
I know I did. 100% saw it. And do you know what? I actually thought the first half of the game was very dead. It felt like my little fella was there, my wife was there, and I said to her after 10, 15 minutes, this feels like a league game. Because it was just very poor at stages. There was no atmosphere there whatsoever. And ironically enough, those hits by Ger Hegarty, Seamus Flanagan, and a few others actually sparked into life. And I think that we have to be very careful that we don't actually lose the essence of like hurling, in the sense that you have to leave those hits go in as long as they're not intentional to hurt someone. I think they're a huge part of the game, and I think most players will enjoy it in a strange way, even though they might get hurt. Like you hear Camogie ladies football going on for the last like 10 years talk about like more physicality. The last thing we want to do is to try and take away the physicality. And look, don't get me wrong, the Seamus Flanagan one, yes, it was a bit late, hit Stephen in the face, that's fine. I don't know in terms of, this is again a different conversation. Is there like some sort of sighting thing? I'm not saying that there should be. It has no beneficial outcome from the Waterford game, because if someone gets cited after a match for hitting someone like that, it's the following couple of games where it might be clear in this coming week that they'll benefit from not having Seamus Flanagan. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do there. But these hits are going to take place. You go back to, that great Kilkenny team, we always was judge or, refer to things from great teams. That Kilkenny team were amazing to watch and great team. And we've always spoken about those players being on the edge. I don't know how many times growing up as a kid where I heard somebody saying, Tommy Welch plays on the edge. Tommy Welch plays on the edge, and he was probably one of the best players ever to play. So I don't think that you can naively say, all those hits happened and we should be very mindful of those. Yes, if someone goes in and hurts someone, absolutely send them off. But if Ger Hegarty wasn't on a yellow card before that, it's a yellow card, you get on with it.
Yeah. And I don't think, I know some people are going to go, Hegarty's been sent off before. It's like, I don't think that matters at all. He's not going to think twice about this as the season goes on.
That's why he's so good. That is why he is so good. He is so good because he is on the edge.
One thing that did strike me was that the weather's shite, and like watching Harrington talk recently about like when the sun goes in, the ball travels less. I do wonder if that atmosphere at the start was partly because it was absolutely freezing, and like it's April and this is still the Munster. These are the best games we're going to see all year, and it's not summertime.
Well, it's not your home stadium either. And look, I contradict myself here because Clare lost, but looking at the pictures from Ennis, and it absolutely packed, and the sun was shining there, and you thought, this is what it's about. Like the fact Waterford don't have a home stadium at least
they're getting it fixed.
Mid-June or mid-July, I think we'll be somewhat closer, I think, to a finished stadium.
But mid-July is when these games will be on.
I take your 2 points. No, and do you know what? These were things that I've thought of it in my head as well. Home advantage is hugely important. I mean, like, there's no point, like, that conversation has been well traversed over the last number of years since we changed the format. Ironically enough, I had a conversation again where when I was walking up to the stadium, I missed that feeling of knockout hurling. For the traditionalists, in the sense that I think that there has to be something on the line. Regardless of anything in life, I think there needs to be something on the line. For Waterford yesterday, and I even heard it, and it kind of annoyed me to an extent on the television, I won't say what's it, where someone said, you have a free shot at Limerick next week. And I kind of said, well, not really, like, because it's a championship game and you want to win your championship game. So I think there needs to be something on the line. If that was a knockout championship game, I think it would be a very different atmosphere there as well. I get the point on the weather. The weather actually wasn't too bad yesterday. It was actually quite warm. We went onto the field yesterday after the match, and it was actually quite warm down there.
Okay.
But I get your point. It was quite cold in the stadium underneath the shelter, but on the pitch it was actually quite warm, and that's a factor I think that Waterford will have to play into as well. Like, they played 81 minutes yesterday against a very good Limerick side, physically, emotionally, mentally, where you prepared. Like, it's going to be very hard for them to try and get themselves up for Cork this week. Down in Cork. On the road again.
One last thing, we've seen Limerick rack up massive scores, and they're having massive wide counts because they're taking a huge number of shots. This is something Scale's been on about on the Hurling Pod a good bit, and Waterford managed to stop them being able to do that by clogging up the system. Is that a template for other teams to match? Now, everybody doesn't have the same physicality or at least the height that Waterford have. But is there the bones of a template there for other teams to look at and try and pick a little bit away at Limerick?
Yeah, and I do think, to be fair, I do think most teams are slowly trying to change things to suit. The one thing I'd be fearful of doing that is, like, Limerick are one team. You're like, Cork are going to play a very different game. Limerick play a different game. Clare play a different game, etc., etc., etc. I think that you're focused solely on playing Limerick. You might shoot yourself in the foot short term. So you might even get out of Munster to play him in a semi-final or a final. That'll be my one fear. But I do think it's definitely opening up the conversation for how to potentially get at Limerick. Now, that's easier said than done. You look at Limerick's bench yesterday. It's phenomenal. Incredible. And again, that's down to like a lot of work that was done under the structures, schools, etc. But my fear factor for that would be, and maybe look, this is a thing as well in Waterford where we are probably looking at the same thing where we have Ballygunner that are going for 10 in a row and everyone is talking about Ballygunner. You might never get to play Ballygunner because you're so concerned about playing them and how they play that you forget to just play. Might have to play like a Romore Mount Sion or Lismore, etc. to get there, and you might never get there. So that will be a fear factor. But I do think that more teams are slowly starting to change how they play.
All right, Noel, we'll leave it there for now. Good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, lads. Have a good morning.
You too. Noel Connors there giving us some thoughts on that. We'll obviously talk more about Clare and Tip. Michael Verney's going to join us in studio tomorrow. We'll have a look at that point. It's a fair point. Like, you need to be very confident that you're going to get another crack at Limerick. Kilkenny can think like that, I think. Galway can probably think like that they're going to have to come up. If you want to win the All-Ireland, you're going to have to beat Limerick at some point. But if you're in Munster, you might not get a chance to get out of Munster.
At the same time, it's your first game for Waterford. And look, Davy's going to set up defensively anyways. That you don't want to take an almighty beating and all your momentum is gone. And you're right, like 19 points isn't going to win a game of Championship Hurling all summer. So they can't go out next time with the same setup. And like, they never looked like scoring a goal yesterday.
No,
because they're playing so deep.
No, but like they did have a lot of wides. They should have had 25 points yesterday.
But
that would have been realistic.
I know she's going to say they actually weren't under that much pressure, but like part of that's just Limerick. Like it's the same sort of conversation you used to have about the Dubs. Oh, they had chances. This happened. That happened. Like there's a weight of playing Limerick now that's in your head.
Yeah,
everything's a bit harder.
I definitely think. I do think that this is exactly what John Kiley would have wanted in terms of the league is over, we coasted through it essentially, and now wake up everybody.
Well, it's going to be really interesting next Saturday night at the Gaelic grounds, Limerick against Clare, how Clare set up, because listen, we always say 2 defeats and you're gone. Maybe it's going to be different this year, that Limerick beat everybody and then everybody else beats everybody. But like, do Limerick go up and look at the Waterford template, or do Clare look at the Waterford template and think that's the way we need to set up here, and we've got better forwards, but they need a result?
I'm not sure they have the same. I don't know. I'd love to see the height and strength advantage that Waterford might have, because that was the thing that they were building last year that made everybody think that actually in the league.
The other thing we didn't touch on there is Tadhg de Burker's out now for the season, so they need somebody to step in at centre half. Maybe Callum Lyons goes in. Ozzie Gleeson came off the bench. Just looking there, 7 years since Ozzie Gleeson was Hurler of the Year. You're still sort of waiting for the second coming.
Yeah, now would be a good time for it. Right, OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shaver, your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. On tomorrow's show, we have Tommy Rooney's Power Rankings, Michael Verney, and plenty more coming your way in terms of GAA, and obviously reaction and analysis to more of the football too. But at 9:37, Shane's going to be live at the Crucible as well. Right now, some of the best of the Sunday pay-per-view. Have a magical Monday, mates/friends. It says here from Colin.
Curious for your thoughts on this. So Pat Spillane, he's referring here to the brilliant Monaghan Tyrone game. Don't be fooled by the hype. Football is a bore fest.
If we could put this into context in relation to the things yesterday, this would be the equivalent of Pat standing in Croke Park with a little sign saying it's still shite.
Yeah. Still puking. I laugh out loud there, but I am not entirely in disagreement with him.
I'm not either.
I like the language.
Everyone got carried away with 902 and scored that amazing goal last week.
Yeah.
But this
like
is
the
his point.
second half of that game, it was maybe 1994 down v Derry was a great game, but other than that second half was as good as I've ever seen in an Ulster football game.
Great.
But it was an outlier, as you know, as is pointed out in Pat's play. the other two games in Ulster were really one-sided, and Armagh were miles better than Cavan yesterday again. There could be a few more one-sided games in Ulster to come, and part of the thing I think. I would go to a fair few club games in both Donegal and Dublin, and so many players now, if you're in your early 20s, say that infamous Donegal-Dublin 2011 semi-final was 12 years ago. So if you're 21, you are 9. So there's a lot of people who've grown up just playing this possession game and fist passing and over and back, and it's all about possession and playing the percentages. They actually don't know anything else.
Yeah.
So it's very, very hard to change that mindset. Even if you go in as a coach and say you're from a different generation, like Colm O'Rourke saying, I want to go more direct, I want to go more traditional, and that suits Meath football. All the players he's inherited and has taken in from their clubs have grown up from the age of 8, 9, playing a completely different way, and it's very, very hard to change that.
So Spillan's piece, to give you a flavour of it, he starts off by saying, even though I spent years studying English at secondary school, I still have no interest in or love of poetry. I doubt if I'm alone. I imagine 99% of the Irish population haven't a clue whether Evan Boland is a type of biscuit or an Irish poet. Yet during Joe Biden's presidential visit, nearly every speech included the obligatory poetry quote. As an aside, I also agree with that. Jesus, Biden. Yeah. I mean, every bloody time you open your mouth.
Lay off the heaney.
Well, especially because in virtually every time it's done, that the person doesn't actually read poetry. It's been thrown in there by a speechwriter or who's Googled Irish poetry quotes.
Well, he doesn't.
No. In fairness, I think Biden is obsessed with heaney.
Well, no, he is.
Very often, fair. You're right.
Yeah. But is he obsessed? Yeah, even Bold, I wouldn't be sure he's familiar with. No.
Sorry, is it even?
Yeah,
Evan Boland.
Sorry. Well, I just thought a few times when he was saying, as the great Irish poet, and then he'd strain at the auto cue. I just thought there was a degree of that at times, Heaney aside, for sure. Anyway.
He goes on to quote Patrick Kavanagh. Anyway.
He does, yeah. It seemed like there were extra marks for quoting an Irish poet. The more obscure, the better. This poetry love-in peaked when ex-President Mary Robinson recited an entire Evan Boland poem during her warm-up address to 27,000 people in Ballina. Methinks she lost the audience. But in the spirit of the moment, I decided to go with the flow this morning. And so he quotes Patrick Kavanagh, who did play football as well. And he said, we never finished a game if towards the end we were abating. We always found an excuse to rise a row and get the field invaded.
But I have to say, that a point of information, that's not from a poem. No. That's from an essay called Gut Your Man, which everybody should read. It's one of the funniest pieces I've ever read in Gaelic football.
Well, that's 1930s advice. If you're getting a hammering, just start a row and get the thing abandoned. Anyway, here we go. So he says, after the match last week, we heard the phrases, and we did, in fairness, everyone was saying, well, what's wrong with Gaelic football? Who said Gaelic football was boring and predictable? The Ulster Championship never disappoints. He goes on to say, modern day football is boring and predictable. And he says, the Ulster Championship never disappoints line. He mentions Derry beaten Fermanagh by 12 points and a 9-point win for Armagh over Antrim. So let's have a reality check. Of course, we witnessed a damn good match in Omagh. Provided us with a glimmer of hope, but one swallow never made a summer. I won't get carried away yet. So his point ties in with Mark O'Shea's argument. He says Monaghan threw off the shackles, they released the handbrake, they played without fear. Mark O'Shea starts off by writing about his brother Tomas's Kerry under-20 side, who scraped past Clare last Monday evening, and he started off imagining Tomas's dressing room chat afterwards, which would be tetchy enough. But he did say that, based on all the matches he watched this spring, fear has trumped ambition in Gaelic football. Possession has been king. Risk aversion has been the tactic of choice. And as a result, the game, as a spectacle, nosedived. He says it's one thing watching senior footballers doing it. It's another when you're watching an underage team playing to such a cautious script. And Kerry, he says, were no different, playing with an extra defender, even with the wind in the first half, reluctant to kick the ball in case they risked it being turned over. They struggled all evening. And
I don't know about you, but it was always one of the reasons I loved covering schools football. I loved covering under-21s and minors, because there wasn't that. They were just free to play. They weren't being restrained by managers. They were letting them do their thing. Okay, there's tactics in it, but not this constant fear of losing the ball that just everybody is obsessed with now. So it's interesting that he's seeing it at under-20 level now.
It's true, and he makes the argument. So it's, to draw a link, Spillane talks about Monaghan throwing off the handbrake and the shackles. tackles. And Mark O'Shea's making the point that he thinks one of the reasons the game last week was good is that he says there are no consequences for losing. Indeed, there may be benefits. You have a defeat which, grounds the group, and then you get 4 or 5 weeks training, and that will arguably leave you in a better place than if you went on a winning streak and took an Ulster title. So he said it may lead us to a rather perverse place where the standard of the spectacle will get better because it's the fear of losing isn't there. But that is only because the importance of the game is diminished. So the spectacle will get better because the importance of the game is diminished. I'm not sure whether to be happy or sad about that. It's like getting a sugar rush, but at the same time feeling guilty because it's not good for you in the long term. He says there's no longer even the pretense that somehow a loss in the provincials is damaging for these top sides. You lose or you win, you end up in the same place in a month's time. As a result, the football may look prettier, but at the end of the day, you're left asking the ultimate damning question about the championship football. Does it really matter? So there we are. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it is interesting, but it matters to some teams. Say Monaghan aren't going to win All Ireland. Tyrone could win All Ireland. Boys. Yeah. So to Monaghan winning an Ulster would be a huge deal. Even if they won a couple in the last decade, but generally they haven't won. Before that you'd go back to the 80s. It would still mean you saw what it meant to Derry last year. It would mean a lot to Roscommon because generally it's a carve up between Mayo and Galway. We saw what it meant to Tipperary when they won in Munster, what it meant to Cavan a few years ago. And all those counties I mentioned there are not going to win the All Ireland. So to them, the provincials really matter. It doesn't matter really. To Mayo, the goal has to be the All Ireland, of course.
Yeah.
So losing to Roscommon was a blow, but ultimately they'll probably go into the All Ireland series seated the same level as Roscommon.
Yeah.
And also, just one quick one, clean. I think also this season is a learning curve for everybody because it's a new system and we don't really know what it's going to be like. No. Like at the end of it, we could be saying this doesn't work at all. The All Ireland series could be a disaster. It could be a lot of one-sided games.
You could potentially have a load of one-sided games because you could lose. I think you can lose 3 games and still go through. Like the way it's set up means you could actually have a few more dead rubbers even in that. Everybody thinks, this is going to be the big saver. I don't think it is. I thought there's 2 things. One was Darren Hughes was gone last week. So once Darren Hughes was gone, Monaghan changed how they played. So it wasn't like we'll deliberately all go to out attack. They actually had to do it for
and very clever
tactic
by Vinnie Corey bringing McCarthy back back to wing back, and he basically ran the game as a deep line playmaker from there. And it was a move that nobody really saw coming, but. In the ultimate scheme, the bigger scheme of things, it's a game that completely be forgotten at the end of the year. But it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, it was great.
At the time, and that's what sport is. It's not always about the destination,
No, it was a great Sunday for all their fans and for all the players. It was living life.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody loved it. It didn't matter where you were from, they loved it. But there is an interesting piece because in the Sunday World, a page behind Spallan's pieces, it's interesting because Roy Curtis has a piece and he's saying, and it struck me watching Dublin during the league particularly, like Con O'Callaghan, don't waste him bringing him back to defend. I'm sorry, one of the most lethal forwards in the country, and a lot of the time this year they played him like that, and he's making the argument that he is Dublin's Haaland, and playing him back and using him defensively is just it's just a terrible waste of talent, and that's the fear you have with these systems,
But now everybody does it. Like last night I saw it where Rian O'Neill would be Armagh Con O'Callaghan.
Yeah, brilliant.
And he
striker.
made a diving save on the line.
Incredible stop. Actually, an incredible stop.
Brilliant. And he should be their full forward and left in there. But this is what they all do now.
I don't mind that as much, I have to say, because I think the players are so fit they can transition quickly and get up the pitch. What bothers me, I suppose.
But in those really pedestrian matches where nobody's doing anything, that's where I just can't bear
Cork and Clare was a good example the other week, where it was just possession for possession's sake.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think if you were to hit pause and ask all the players who were just mindlessly going side to side, the Cork players, what are you working towards here? What are you trying to engineer here? I honestly think they would have said, I don't know, I was just hand passing to the guy next to me. I'm not giving the ball away, because that gives us some sense of sophistication.
Well, if you listen to even Paddy Andrews on your own football pod this week with Tommy Rooney, James O'Donoghue saying, in that instance, I would have punched the ball last weekend. I mean, seriously, one of a really brilliant lethal striker for Kerry when he was there. And to hear him saying that he would have punched the ball, I'm like, oh no. But then Paddy goes, when we were in trouble with Dublin, the rule was take 2 minutes out of the ball and find a shot.
Yeah.
And that's what football is now.
But you know, with Dublin, I never minded it because I knew there was a methodology and a purpose to it. Whereas I honestly think quite a few of the county teams are mimicking that, but not thinking it through.
Yeah,
there's no sense of adventure. There's no risk. And I did think watching Cork Clare, like,
well, you see,
you
you've
lads
got to
are
have
training 51 weeks a year for this. You know, this is your life, and you're only going to be that age once. And like, there just has to be more adventure about your play. But I just think like. This mimicry has taken over a little bit. Not in all cases. And by the way, when football gets to the latter stages, it is 100% better than it's ever been.
Yeah,
I think
when you get the brilliant players moving the ball fast,
better than it's ever been. But I think the
the
bad teams are just mimicking without purpose.
Well, it's this thing of don't lose the ball.
Don't lose the ball.
Yeah, don't lose the ball.
I'll go off on a bit of a tangent here, but this really struck me as well because Donegal are playing down today. Right?
Sorry, they were. You want to see you want to see a team playing without method in the league. If you're like, so give us other examples. Donegal. Numero uno.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
My uncle there, by the way, against Dublin, it was just back and forth. Back and forth.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like I never remember. Excuse me. Like 10 of the players who played Donegal's last championship game last year aren't available for this one today, which is amazing turnaround. And for various reasons, between retirement, injury, they've opted out, whatever. And then there's the player heave against Paddy Carr. There's everything that's going on with Academy Carr Lacey that I don't remember expectations ever being lower. But it just struck me this weird thing in the GAA about being professional. So one of the things that people try to be professional at training camps. So Donegal, in county board meetings where they were discussing all this going to the academy and the player heave, etc., they also approved the players going, the squad going to Carton House for a couple of nights, which was last week, at a cost of 35 grand.
Oh,
I remember seeing that.
Okay, and like everybody in Donegal knows Donegal are going to do nothing this year. They've already been relegated, and they're not going to be good championships. It's just not going to happen. So why are you doing that money? Especially when last October, they opened their Centre of Excellence in Convoy that ultimately will cost 7 million. That when you are spending this amount on your own, and also at that county board meeting, they talked about how difficult they're finding it on the fundraising front this year because of all the bad publicity around what has happened with Paddy Carr and the academy. But there's no joined up thinking there. Like this is a year if that came up to me and I was county board chairman, and you said we have spent millions on a Centre of Excellence. Why are we paying for a training camp? And especially this is a season that we just have to hunker down and get through it and try and rebuild for next year. But I think this is the thing that so many go, we have to be seen to be professional. So being seen to be professional is funneling the ball around all day and never taking a shot. Yeah. It's going to Carton House when you're no
What
helper.
is professional? Yeah, what is professional, you see? That's
it's burning up money. Like as you say, watching that Cork Clare game, they've trained so hard and that's what they're doing. Because like Ryan O'Toole did something that most coaches would have been tearing their hair out because he did it. Because 19 times out of 20, it went past two Tyrone players. 19 times out of 20 would hit one of their legs.
It was totally the wrong thing to do. Yeah. It was. Like, we can't just be outcome based. It was the wrong thing to do, but good luck to him.
Yeah. Well, we were all delighted by it as well, excited by it.
Yeah.
And they, it's funny, Hurling is under a little bit of pressure as well at the moment. Yeah,
I was going to say. So, for instance,
do you like your hurling, Joe?
Michael Foley on page 17 of the Sunday Times. Kind of interesting piece. There is, by the way, across the board, but we won't get too into it because it will date horribly if you're listening to this on a Monday. There are lots of previews of the Championship. We have Waterford, Limerick today, and Clare Tipperary. Suffice to say, everybody thinks Limerick will win the All-Ireland, and at a canter, that's the gist. But Michael Foley's piece, goals are drying up, so where is hurling headed? And it ties in with that point about possession as well. He said the real problem for hurling now goes to the very soul of the game itself. The game remains too cold at the moment. It's too clinical. What do the GAA want hurling to be? What should it look and feel like? In a global environment where control, possession and percentage plays have emerged as the defining characteristics of modern sport, how does a gloriously random sport like hurling cope? That is such an interesting way of framing hurling. It is in the midst of this global environment where all sports are about control, possession, percentage plays, and so where does a sport like hurling fit into that? The belief, continues Michael Foley, embedded over generations was that hurling was never built to be played in that way. Now there's a generation that can't imagine any other form of the game. It's even more demoralising when all the conditions are there for hurling to thrive. Players have never been fitter or as skillful, scoring records tumbling every year, and Limerick are outstanding champions. But hurling itself cannot self-regulate against elements of play attacking its very identity. He says there was some hope in the stats last year that the game was about to enjoy a spike in goal scoring. The figures from the 21 championship showed an average of 3.5 goals per game, the highest in nearly a decade. Instead, though, teams retreated into their shells. In 34 championship games last year, 97 goals were scored, which is an average of 2.8 goals per game. And in the league, we saw a continuation of that, 92 goals in 34 matches. Although I have to say, I did wonder if in the league generally we see fewer goals with the weather. However, as goals are being outgrown by long distance points, a dreary sort of order has dammed up a wonderful source of chaos. And he finishes off by wondering if, various committees have examined increasing the points value of a goal or adjusting the design of the sliotar. The science of making the ball heavier won't shorten the distance. The idea of increasing the rim size to reduce the aerodynamic quality and make it harder to ping stick passes and puck outs has never really stuck. But they have to try. There should be no limit to thinking. To reduce, for instance, long-range scoring and encourage more contests. Why not make any free inside a team's half an indirect strike?
Yeah.
There isn't a player who will wish to adjust the ball or to see any free removed as a scoring opportunity, but those are the hard types of choices that need to be made.
And it's like taking the mark out of, the forward mark in Gaelic football. Again, I think that forward mark is depriving us of,
chaos.
More exciting action that we want to see. The chaos, exactly. And he makes the point. He was saying in the world of heritage sports, and he equates hurling to baseball in America. He says, but American baseball, they haven't been afraid to change the rules of baseball to try to change how the game was going. And I think, I've been thinking about this for the last 2 years. I mean, Limerick are amazing. They're brilliant. They're fantastic. But I miss fielding. I hate all the rucks. I miss goals, and I miss fielding. And that brilliant Kilkenny team of Cody's, my God, their fielding was sensational. That was part of the joy of watching them, was how brilliant they were at fielding.
Tommy Welch is on the show later, watching him go up and catch a ball.
Oh, I mean, for a guy who wasn't huge, but just everything about the way they played. And these Limerick hurlers are sensational hurlers. Their skill levels are phenomenal. But he's right in that. Enda McAvoy put it brilliantly in the Examiner in a piece yesterday, where he said, when the game has evolved to the point where guys can light a cigar when they're out playing half back before they send in, an 80-metre free, there's something slightly gone. The balance has shifted. Yeah. And I did think that the thing that's been in my mind was the ball. Can we change the ball to make it heavier so that you can't score so easily from long distances anymore? Because that's what physically they're able to do with their skill and their power. And it's interesting because I didn't know that the science said the making it wouldn't shorten the distance. No. But I do think that there is something to be said for down the road. Look, maybe this Limerick team are an aberration and other people can't do it. But I noticed even during the league, the ability of players to score long range points. And in the league, it's nearly more obvious because they're not being challenged at the same level as well. There isn't the same physicality in the game. Yeah. But it is a really interesting point. It's like where is the game evolving?
Yeah,
and where is the delight of the goals? We're not seeing as many goals.
Geniuses like Paul Connors who sit there and go against conventional wisdom, and they figure out new ways to do things. I mean, changing the rims would change how aerodynamic the balls are, and that would make it harder. Are hurling people unhappy with?
I think a lot of them are.
Going?
I think a lot of them are, because the appeal was, a large part of the appeal was the chaos, because hurling was so different to other team sports, and that it wasn't all about possession. It was about content. Like, you got it, and it was a contest that really energised people. Like the roar, somebody would just do a mad clearance up the field, and there would be a battle for it inside, and people loved that kind of thing. And also, remember, not that long ago, the reaction to long-range scores. Like, they used to get a huge cheer because they were unusual.
They were big.
Not anymore.
Every time people see them, or people expect them.
There is something wrong when you see players on their bad side knocking over a pint from 60 metres and the commentators saying, that's a score.
You nearly don't appreciate the skill of it. Do you know what I mean? And the other thing, what I always loved about hurling is that you couldn't play negatively. that you couldn't.
It's uncontrollable.
You couldn't bring everybody back to defend. That's what I love about hurling.
Yeah.
But essentially, that is what started to happen. You play one sweeper, you play two sweepers, and then because of the strength and the speed of the players and the skill, we can score. We can score very quickly on the counter. So it has changed. And do hurling people feel this way about it? I think there are elements of hurling people do. And Michael Dignan even mentions it as well today in his column in the Mail on Sunday. And he's also making that thing. He's talking about his 25 years since Offaly won that famous, that most dramatic of all Ireland's, and the chaos of that year he just talks about. And everything was so crazy that year. But he's saying there is a little bit of wildness lost, a little bit of excitement lost. And even in the way the game is being played now, we're losing that thrill. We're losing a bit of the drama.
Because do you think those sensibilities might have changed now? And so we're harking back to that bit of wildness. But if we were to be reserved that for whatever reason, do you think any of us would sit there and think, this is actually brainless stuff? They're just whacking it away.
Well, no, because it wasn't brainless. There were some teams that played that way. But if and they used to always say, "Oh, Cody doesn't play tactics." Of course, he played tactics, but it was their ability to dominate everybody in the air. And there is that thing in hurling about beating your man or your woman in the air. That is a mark of brilliance, and I think that's been lost.
Yeah, I think possibly you might look at it with a more sceptical eye, just because we've been so conditioned. It's like if you watch soccer from the 80s or the 90s or the 70s.
Unwatchable.
It often looks slow and unwatchable, or often is slow and unwatchable, because you're conditioned by what you're watching week on week now. But I always think that the quote from Anthony Daly is probably the best ever to come out of hurling, when he said, sure, look at hurling, 1,000 mad things and someone comes out on top. But the problem is you don't get the mad things as much anymore.
Well, no, the Paul Canucks of the world rightly say, well, we can control a lot more here than we thought.
And it's why our jaws drop when Joe Canning or
OTB AM with Gillette Labs.